Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all, gotta catch 'em all. I missed a line there. I don't remember where it was.
I did not expect you to start singing.
Pringles, you just summoned all my children. Hold on. On the road, far from home, you don't have to be alone. 'Cause brave and strong, together we can be. It's our destiny, we can be heroes. We can change the world if we try. I go where you go, forever friends, you and I.
How many seasons did you watch?
Pokemon?
Yeah?
Let's see. I think I watched the original season. I believe I watched Johto. I know. I remember watching Unova. Might have watched some Sun Moon. I think I stopped partway through Hoenn, and then I picked up later on. Oh, thank you, Risa. Moving up with everybody wants to be a master. Everybody wants to prove their skills. Everybody wants to get there faster. Make their way to the top of the hill. Each step we climb, gonna get just a little bit better. Early time we try. Every step we climb is one more step up the ladder. It's a whole new world we live in. Pokemon Johto. It's a whole new way to see. It's a whole new world with a brand new attitude. But you still gotta catch them all and be the best that you can be. Do 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 do.
Can't hear it, but I'm clapping right now.
I believe you.
That was great.
Man, I haven't heard
Yeah,
those songs in a long
I
time.
can only agree. I can only agree. I did not expect someone to really like know the whole lyrics.
Well, I didn't. I missed. I know, at least in the original song, there's the "Oh, you're my best friend in a world we must defend" part, but I don't actually remember where in the song that part goes.
Well,
Ready?
that was a nice intro to this. Guess we'll start. I need to sit down. While today was one big unpleasant experience with all that emotional pain I had caused, we were at least able to celebrate the successful end of our plan. It was this small relief that it was finally over, which made this all palatable. That was, of course, until Ferdinand brought this girl named Mila here, and she began dropping one revelation after another. And while I had been excited at the start, it slowly devolved into something that made me want to cradle my head in despair. My oldest sister, Georgine, would soon become the first wife of Ob Arnsback, an influential position in a greater duchy to the south. A much more powerful and influential duchy. A position that guaranteed her attendance at the Archduke's conference next year, and she still hated me with a great passion. While Mila didn't know exactly what occurred there and mentioned that some of it was caused by the outcome of the Civil War, I had my suspicion that Georgine had at least something to do with it. I looked around. Rosamund and Mila were chatting with each other about something completely unrelated. They didn't look at all stressed about it. It was kind of annoying. Thankfully, both Ferdinand and Karstedt did look the part. The worries were apparent in their thoughts. Well, more with one than the other. It was comforting to know that I could share this headache.
I found the path to the Ehrenfest Foundation or something like that. I don't know. I don't know whether it is a noble euphemism that she found a way to get enough support in Ehrenfest, or if she actually knows the path to the foundation.
Those had been Mila's words. It still rang in my head, the nonchalant way she had said it. I wanted to scream at her. What do you mean, or something? I was seriously contemplating using the magic tool and looking at her memories. I needed to know.
Please stop doing it!
What now? I lost my focus as I heard Rosamund complaining.
What did I do?
Mila looked lost.
Stop expecting me to know what you know that I should have known.
That was a rather convoluted way to say it. I leaned towards Karstedt. What are they arguing about? Though he wasn't too sure.
They were discussing some sort of pump.
He shrugged.
Wait, who's Ferdinand?
I thought Bien was Ferdinand.
No, Ferdinand cursed that. I thought it was Farron. Oh, if Farron's not here right now,
No, it
we'll do
was.
Ferdinand.
No,
Alright.
no, Ferdinand
Uh,
was Fairy Hex, I think. No?
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 I'll pick up Ferdinand then.
I mean, yeah, Vienna's cursed
No,
that, right?
Fairune was Ferdinand. Fairune.
Hold on,
Fairune
what's
Oh
his
my
type
God.
in?
Ferdinand.
My memory is terrible.
Alright, any other girl wanna pick up Ferdinand?
What does mean?
The real Ferdestine is happening.
Yeah.
I guess I could.
Woo,
Alright, sure, Fairy.
Ferdestine.
Fairy denied.
Fairy denied.
Alright.
It is
Go.
pretty clear.
Ferdinand commented beside him.
She asked about Roseman's future invention, while Roseman obviously hasn't thought about it yet.
He then steps towards Mila, who is apologizing to Rosemine at the moment.
We have to discuss your information. Go to a waiting room, and we will call you later.
Okay.
She replied and left the room. Ferdinand sighed.
Sylvester, shouldn't you be heading back to the Archduke conference?
No way, I'm sitting this out. Don't worry about that. This is much more important. I'll make some excuse. Ferdinand shook his head.
No doubt you will.
He said in a resigned voice. But what did he expect? I needed to know now. More importantly, I began to change the subject. What are your thoughts on this? This whole time he was listening. Not to mention, he had already known about some of this in advance.
Sadly, it's mostly useless.
What? I let that word out of me. His reaction took me by surprise. It was an incredible well of information, so why would he think otherwise? Or maybe I was just too invested in what had been said. Was he thinking about her manipulating us? After all, Mila didn't want us to know anything from those notes she had written. Do you suspect her of fabricating some parts of her story to manipulate us in a certain way? She had used that pretty obvious excuse when she asked Ferdinand if he wanted to share secrets with us. While there was some merit to that, it was clear the main reason was her not wanting to share what was in her notes. We played along at the time, but I had my doubts.
Not at all. Quite the opposite. I believe that she is trying to remember things truthfully.
He replied easily, not even thinking about it. How can you tell? He was the most cautious person I knew. If he wasn't suspicious of her, then he had to have a solid reason for that. Ferdinand understood my doubts and began explaining.
Clearly, if someone actually wanted to manipulate you with a prophetic vision, they would put themselves or their goal into that vision.
Rosemine shot up, though she was still far below us.
Something like, there is great danger, but if you give me a few large golds, I will go away, right?
Correct.
Ferdinand agreed. It made sense. From everything that Mila had mentioned, there was nothing connected to her. It might have been different if she was important from a third duchy. There could be some advantage in putting two different duchies into conflict and then exploding the chaos, but I was sure that Ferdinand would have already investigated such an option. It was clear that wasn't the case as he continued with his explanation.
She did the exact opposite. When we talked about the last trauma mission, not only did she admit that we would have achieved our goals without her help, but that her very existence is something that could jeopardize them.
That's basically asking to be eliminated, I replied without a second thought. Was everyone from a different world completely oblivious to the common dangers in this one?
What? Did you know that?
Rosamine asked. How can you even be surprised by that? Isn't that obvious? While I was silently complaining about her, Ferdinand continued.
Obviously.
he replied. Wait, she knew and went with it anyway? Being oblivious to danger was one thing, but doing that knowingly? It baffled my mind.
Didn't it be better to lie?
Rosamine took the words out of my mouth.
Probably, but she gambled on the value of being an honest source.
Ferdinand replied. When I thought about it a little more, this didn't have to be such a bad gamble after all. I peeked at Rosamine. She was alive after all, and I wasn't planning to treat her badly. Was Mila so trusting in this regard because she had read about how we would treat Rosamine? It was confusing to think about it like that. So why do you think it's mostly useless? Asked my brother. If she wasn't lying, then it was big. But Ferdinand thought otherwise. While we found out just today, he must have thought about this for a very long time, so I trusted his opinion.
Because it's mostly from Rosman's perspective.
He said bluntly.
What's that supposed to mean?
Rosamine made a pout and glared at Ferdinand.
Exactly what I said. Assume for a moment that Assume for a moment that you would want to use it for your benefits. What would you do?
I would never send that letter to Georgine.
She declared confidently.
And then what?
What do you mean, then what?
Rosamine looked confused. Ferdinand just shook his head.
Georgine still remains the first wife of an orb in a greater duchy. There are still unknown connections she possesses in this duchy.
While he was explaining, I could see how Rosamine's energy slowly declined, but she still tried to argue.
Wait, but Mila mentioned some nobles.
She mentioned 2 names that she remembered, and then described that there were a dozen or more who weren't mentioned.
Ferdinand sighed.
You change one step, you won't continue with the same path. I could clearly see that when Mila described to me the Trombe mission from last autumn.
I would have to ask him about that mission later. Something about it had clearly changed his attitude towards this whole thing. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something must have happened that made him believe it was better not to rely on this. Meanwhile, he continued his lecture.
If you don't send that letter, everything else that she described after that happens differently in a way that you can't prepare for.
Couldn't we maybe change something so that Georgine won't become the first wife in the first place? I'd rather avoid this whole thing, but Mila didn't say anything about the political situation in Arnsbach. Right? It was Rosamine's perspective, and if she doesn't visit, then... I was beginning to understand Ferdinand's issue with it. He was fixing Rosamine with his eyes.
And since it's largely from your perspective, we don't actually know what is happening behind the scenes. What is worse, since it's your perspective, you could misconstrue what is actually happening.
That's ridiculous.
Rosamine protested.
Really?
Ferdinand asked with a smirk.
What was your impression of the High Bishop when you met him the very first time?
Rosamine produced an awkward smile to that question.
Right. I thought he was like a nice grandpa.
Really, Uncle? He was my family, so I didn't have the same indifferent attitude towards him as Ferdinand, but even I wouldn't call him that. Ferdinand was eyeing Rosamine as he spoke.
And if you dreamed about your future up to that point?
He nudged her verbally to answer.
I would have probably rushed to the temple even sooner.
She admitted. And that was pretty much shut down all of her protests. So we can't use this after all? I asked with unease.
Not quite. Knowing about your older sister is important. Just as that information about the Vang soldiers. But do not try relying on the possible future. Worse than not knowing at all is relying on something that won't happen, and makes you vulnerable in other areas.
Yeah, that was the equivalent of putting all your defenses in Ditter on one single side because you expected attack from there, only to have your treasure stolen from the other side. Not knowing from where the attack would come and putting knights on all sides in smaller numbers was preferable to being wrong. I could see why he had such a problem with it.
So what do we do?
Rosamine asked in an uncertain voice.
You just have to ask not about the future, but about the present.
Ferdinand said naturally.
But we are already in the present, and if it's from my perspective, I already know everything about the present.
Just like you knew everything about the present when you met the former High Bishop of Sylvester.
Ah, asking about the present with hindsight, right?
She exclaimed in realization.
Exactly.
Ferdinand confirmed. Because of Ferdinand, we agreed not ask about anything related to our possible future and called Mila back. Though I wasn't exactly happy with that arrangement, my curiosity had been nagging me ever since I tried to read Mila's notes. Okay, tell me what exactly Rosamine read in your notes, I interjected. Ferdinand glared at us, but obviously I wasn't going to rely on it. I just wanted to know since I couldn't read it myself. Wasn't it better to get rid of such an annoying feeling? Mila began to answer without any protests.
It's a reference to a Harpspiel concert that featured Ferdinand. I don't remember the exact number, but it certainly earned over 10 large golds for the printing industry.
That's a pretty hefty sum. But how is that important? For the amount of curiosity it caused, it was kind of a disappointing fact.
Not everything I noted is important. I just wrote down all I can remember. I'm aware that from this moment onward, that knowledge will be less and less reliable until it won't be useful at all. So I hope that if I wrote a lot down, at least some of that would be useful.
So she was aware. The moment she told us, her value began to drop. That was when Ferdinand steered the conversation his way.
I would like to ask you about your citizenship medal.
Mila's eyes got darker. This is the first time I could see a hostile look on her face. From the moment I had met her, she had managed to go through being scared, cheerful, depressed, or regretful, but never once antagonistic. With her talking to us openly, it was easy to forget that she was a commoner. That's why that look on her face took me by surprise. Though that expression seemed more like frustration than open antagonism. She probably still didn't want to overstep her boundaries. Then she breathed out and lowered her head.
Couldn't you at least start with a carrot instead of a stick?
Mila used some unknown word for that expression, but it wasn't hard to figure out the meaning.
What happened?
Rosamine asked. There was clear worry on her face. Way to kill the mood, Ferdinand.
If I gave it to you, would it be considered a carrot?
He wasn't bothered by Mila's reaction at all.
Sorry. An implied threat doesn't disappear just because I get some random medal. There are 1,000 other ways I could be killed.
She replied pretty irritatedly. She acted in stark contrast to the first time I addressed her. Where exactly had that fearful expression of hers disappeared? But she was right in that regard. I had seen enough people who were protected by magic contracts and mistook it for actual safety, as if no one ever went around a contract.
So why don't you treat it as such?
Ferdinand asked, annoyed.
I'm trying to be as transparent as I can.
Mila retorted. Were they talking about different things? While they stared at each other, Rosamine's frustration clearly overflowed.
Can somebody please explain to me what's wrong with the citizenship medal?
She bursted out. Mila broke her staring contest and turned away from Ferdinand.
Archduke candidates, like these two,
She pointed at me and him.
have a spell where they can just throw it into a dark mist, and then the owner dies a horrible death wherever they are.
Rosamine gulped. What? The spell is used for traitors. Why are you afraid? She would be part of the archducal family, so she would be the one learning it. I couldn't fathom the problem here. Ferdinand still kept his stern look on Mila. When she turned back to him, a sudden realization appeared on her face.
Wait, am I not supposed to talk about it? Are you just trying to scare me? Why can't you just say so? I kept my silence for 2 years.
She said with an exasperated voice. Okay, this might be partly my fault for asking, but Ferdinand was still looking at her instead of me.
If I remember correctly, you kept being silent until it became inconvenience, and then you were willing to talk pretty easily.
Again, he was referencing some past event I had no knowledge about. It was frustrating to be left out. Was this his payback for me not telling him about the adoption charm?
Don't you have magic contracts for keeping someone silent? You just used one today, no?
Mila was getting more and more forward in her speech.
So you're willing to sign one?
Ferdinand asked.
As I said, there are already 1,000 ways to kill me. It's meaningless. You might have already taken some of my blood in my sleep without my knowledge.
I didn't really think you would bother with that.
So, what is your carrots?
Ferdinand kept insisting.
You know what? Fine. Give me access to magic.
She replied bluntly. That was an interesting request. The only way someone was able to wield magic was to become a noble. Rosemind firmly rejected such a trade, yet Mila was willing. You realize what that entails, right? I asked.
I do.
She replied resolutely, which took me aback. And you don't have a problem with that? I wasn't exactly in the mood to destroy yet another family today. Not for a measly lay noble amount of mana in exchange. But Mila almost knocked me down with her response. If I'm being honest...
If I'm being
Oh, sorry.
If I'm being honest, noble culture sucks, but I am willing to kneel for the sake of my comfort.
Did you just say noble culture sucks? I was the one who allowed her to speak in that way in our presence, but you really didn't put any filter on it all.
Well, where would you rather be? Around a group of proper nobles watching your every step? Or going on a hunt with a bunch of orphans who have no status at all?
She got me on that one, but that was also because of all my archducal responsibilities. She shouldn't use me as an example. Still, do you not have a problem with being taken from your family? I asked. After what I just witnessed when Rosemind's family departed, I was wary in that regard.
Not really. I'm not a big fan of getting strangled in my sleep by my father.
She said in an ironic smile. Mila was pretty good for a commoner, but still, her emotions could be discerned easily. While she said it as a matter of fact, almost jokingly, her jaw was shaking. It was just a tiny tremble. For anyone not looking for it intently, there was no movement at all. But I had seen it a long time ago. My brother used to have such a smile when pretending that nothing bothered him before he quickly learned to hide his emotions completely. And I wouldn't even know back then until Riyarda pointed out for me. My eyes wandered between Rosemind and Mila. The painful irony wasn't lost on me. The one with a loving family was the one I had to rip apart, because we wanted her mana. The one with no family was fine being taken away, yet there was no need. Would she even have enough mana at this age? She looked like 7 or 8. Lay noble children spent their whole life since birth accumulating mana in their magic tool to have enough for their Royal Academy classes. Mila watched me thinking about it, and then she hastily added another reason.
And you can use that to your advantage. You want to hide a commoner shrine maiden and becoming a noble. What better way to do that than making a commoner shrine maiden a noble?
That was actually a really good point. Any rumor about nobles would be traced to her. Everyone who would want to start the conspiracy would be met with the simple, "Yes, we know." The problem was, obviously, that it would make Mila ostracized for the rest of her life. Once again, I was baffled about what she wanted to do.
I don't care about the status of the house. I just don't want to be abused. That's the only thing I care about this election.
She pleaded.
Do you have someone in mind?
Ferdinand asked her while carefully watching her reaction.
Samuel's brother, as head of their house, treats commoners well. That would be my first option, though I don't want to impose on him financially, so you would have to help me. And I can just continue to do the administrative work to pay you back.
She was running her fingers on her head to help her remember on the spot.
There's also Illinger. They treat commoners well too, though they are med nobles, and I don't have a great grasp of what is standard for commoner adoptions among nobles.
Standard is no adoptions at all.
Ferdinand said openly. His comment made
Well,
Mila
actually, the standard is baptism, pre-baptism, child laundering. But
yeah.
anyways, like I think Frida mentioned that she got an adoption as a noble. Oh, an adoption offer. She just didn't want it.
Oh wait, really?
Yeah, she mentioned it. The main thing that makes Mila special is the fact that they openly publicized it. Like it's pre-baptism money it's child laundering. It's really common.
Yeah, like for example,
Yeah.
how was like Gracia?
Yeah. Also,
She was a servant, a man-made servant, but still a servant was just laundered as
or
her
if
family's
Frida's
adopted
child
child.
has an Obana, then she'll get baptized under I think it's Henrik or whatever his name is. Yeah.
And I think there was one of the children in the orphanage what was supposed to be adopted by their mother, Lawrence's younger brother.
Yeah.
Like Lawrence, he had a brother, and he was supposed to be baptized by Lawrence's mother.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. Oh yeah.
So
Also,
I think it's actually more common.
yeah,
Okay, sorry
it
for
is.
interrupting.
They just never acknowledge it because it's a massive stain on your reputation.
Yes.
And also because
And also,
nobles don't want to admit that a commoner can do it.
Also because in Beth and West's situation, it was pretty well stated that if his mother would have survived, he would most likely be baptized under one of the mid noble families in their faction.
All right. Anyway, Cinti, continue.
Right. Ferdinand said openly. His comment made Mila look as if cold water had been poured all over her. But it was the truth. Every lay noble would rather adopt a med noble child with lay noble mana than a commoner with lay noble mana.
Still, the recent movements because of the Civil War made it more fluid.
He added with a lower voice while lost in thought. If he was actually thinking about it, he might have already decided to do that, although no one in the room could made any concrete promises. We then finally moved to information sharing.
So you want me to talk only about the present? I guess I understand.
Mila looked completely dejected. She probably had something else in mind. I guess it must have stung to prepare at all, only to be told not to talk about it. I mean, I would want to read those notes. Though Ferdinand might be right, it could cause more harm.
You already know about pretty much all the threats, so there isn't too much to add.
Finally, some encouraging words. I didn't know if I could handle more threats.
First is Rosamine's knowledge. Ferdinand misunderstood her being a noble in her past life because of all the opulence that he saw in her world. In reality, she was just a commoner, so keep it in mind that her perspective isn't like yours at all. Not just advanced customs and traditions, but fundamental morals.
Well, duh, that's pretty obvious. That was probably a warning for Ferdinand. Mila mentioned him specifically. He was the one diving in her memories, so he might be the one confused. Mila turned to Rosamine.
Rosamine, whenever you want to wield your noble status, always explain to your guardians why you want to do it that way.
Yeah, that's good advice, but...
And you three.
She interrupted my thoughts.
Always explain to her all aspects of noble life, no matter how trivial. When she acts like a noble, don't bask in a false sense of accomplishment that she is learning. Always ask why she's doing what she's doing, even if her behavior looks normal on the outside.
I wondered what possible future she was picturing in her mind. What could Ferdinand have misunderstood about Rosamine, and what did it cause? I really wanted to read those notes.
Explain to her the significance of the ivory buildings, what is expected from her, and always say why. If you all abide by this, then you can truly avoid all future problems.
Mila ended her lecture.
Secondly, the podium at Heldensaal, which they use during the spring prayer, has a magic circle there that can bring early spring to the province. This can help with their harvest.
This was excellent news. Finally, some actual solution instead of all those warnings. Though such a powerful spell would require a tremendous amount of mana. Was it actually a good solution, or was it actually a solution in this current mana drought? I knew it was too good at first glance.
Lastly, your son, Wilfrid.
What about him? I tense completely.
You neglected him to the point of abuse.
What? What are you talking about? I was fairly certain I was keeping a proper distance as an Archduke.
You guaranteed his position, so all his retainers stopped trying. You left his education in the hands of Veronica, who just wanted another puppet to rule over. And you ignored all reports that said anything negative about his progress.
Did she know I had guaranteed his position to spare my children from the vicious sibling rivalry I had endured? Ferdinand did say that most of Mila's knowledge was from Rosamind's perspective. Was it possible that she was just biased? After all, Rosamind was being educated under Ferdinand,
What's it?
and he had impossible standards. Sorry.
Nothing.
Yeah. As he is now, he is less educated than orphans here or merchants' apprentices in the lower city. More importantly, he is less educated than lay nobles and is heading into disaster at the winter debut if not corrected.
But still, I shouldn't discard it. I will ask Oswald for more thorough reports on Wilfred's progress. It was getting late, and Karstedt was eyeing me out for our return to the Archduke conference. It was probably the right time. Mila left for her room, and there was once again only 4 of us.
What's the importance of ivory buildings?
Rosamind put up her hand. Right, Mila had mentioned that specifically. Ferdinand started to explain.
All ivory buildings are created by foundational magic wielded by the Archducal family.
He then went on for another lecture. I really wanted to leave. Now I was the one eyeing Karstedt, so he would stop Ferdinand.
Like the time when you caused that incident during the stubborn ceremony.
Hey, I remember that one. It was weird to get a warning and then see a bunch of kids playing around, but in hindsight, everything connected to Rosamind was weird.
Wait! Seriously? That alarmed the Archduke?
Rosamind looked at me and then back to Ferdinand.
I just thought you were being pedantic and unreasonable to make a fuss over one turned stone.
To be honest, that wasn't such an unfair description of my brother. Ferdinand sighed.
I see. This is what she was speaking about.
That was my cue for escape! But then I randomly remembered my question from earlier. Oh, right. Ferdinand. Does she even have enough mana to attend the Royal Academy? Or we have to think of some other arrangement? Don't labelable children need to save up their mana for their whole childhood?
Did you two lie to her?
There was clear mistrust in Rosamind's eyes. Hey, don't look at me. I didn't promise her anything. And Ferdinand was the one asking her about that carrot or whatever it was. Meanwhile, he was just shaking his head.
I said she was on par with lay nobles, not lay noble children. A lay noble child would not be able to fill 2 chalices.
That settles that question.
Yes, I'll start. I'll keep the next one. I entered my room alone when it was almost dark outside. I hadn't been in here in days. It all looked so empty. Wow, Mila, that's amazing! Thanks for all your warnings. We are so grateful, I said to myself with a somber tone and went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I didn't know what to do. There was no attendant that would take me anywhere. There were no leftovers to eat. And it wasn't like I had some fixed appointment for work. All I had was this unfilling taste in my mouth. I had waited for almost 2 years to get to this point. But once here, I just wished to redo it better. And I was keenly aware how ungrateful that sounded from someone who actually got such an opportunity. I didn't know for sure since I couldn't see in their heads, but I had a feeling that they thought of me more as an inconvenience rather than help. Somewhere in there it went south, and Ferdinand started to push me. I think I acted wrong towards him. My thoughts about Ferdinand were influenced by what I knew about him, but most of what I knew about him hadn't happened yet. It might not even happen. And even in that won't happen future, he was influenced by Rosamine. I was not Rosamine. I maybe unconsciously expected similar treatment. Who knows? I reflexively waved my hand. When I was pushed, my mind instinctively went for magic. If they wanted to sideline me, I would at least want the comfort provided by magic. I could easily picture my retirement somewhere in Illinger. People there would certainly appreciate someone who would help them with administrative work or hunting small fey beasts. Someone might actually be glad to have me. It might be weird to think about retirement at the age of 8, but a little peace and calm would be nice. And hey, they would eventually get their growth with the arrival of papermaking, so there would still be something to do. Would they, though? Didn't I change that as well? They pretty much shot down all my knowledge yesterday. It might not happen. But still, Bridget was the only female knight willing to go with Rosamine to the temple. Such a connection wouldn't change by me saying anything. I think. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. I put my clothes on and went outside. Alone. He was gonna yell at me. I told the Archduke that noble culture sucks, and he is incompetent in raising his son. Come at me! I challenged the empty space in front of me, and then I swiftly moved through the white corridors. There were no signs of yesterday's battle. It all looked as if nothing ever happened here. My steps continued outside, around a kneeling grey priest on guard duty, and then down by a busy street in the lower city, until finally I reached the square with stands. I used my last change to buy some warm meat and fill my stomach. Finally, something fulfilling today. It tasted great. After all those dry leftovers in the orphanage, everything freshly made would taste great. Which reminded me, I wanted to give my thanks to Wilma. It was thanks to her hiding me for days that I didn't end up as a consolation prize for Binderwald. With my stomach full, I returned to the temple. On my right, Gilberta was brimming with activity, but it seemed like regular shopping hours. I couldn't differentiate if something related to yesterday was already moving things there. I just continued up north, put on my blue robes, and sneaked back inside. Well, I still just walked around the kneeling guard. I felt bad about doing it to him just for my few-minute walk to the stand and back. I then moved in the direction of the orphanage. Funny how different it felt from when I was there a few days ago. My surroundings were the same, yet that fear of being watched was gone. Sure, there were probably some grey priests that were watching me at this exact moment, but the fear of getting grabbed and disappearing into some dark dungeon was gone. There was only pleasant warm sunlight, making everything bright. I announced my arrival at the door, and soon enough Wilma opened it. Her eyes widened upon seeing me, and she knelt. Is this about my blue robe again? Oops, wait, do we have a Wilma?
I am.
Oh, I got it. Is this about my blue robe again? She had talked to me normally over those days when I was holed up here.
Please allow me to apologize for yesterday's intrusion.
She said with her head down. There's no need. Please stand up. I wanted to thank her, and this was the opposite of that. Sure, I almost got a heart attack when you all marched in on me, but I literally told you to leave it to Rosamine's guard's judgment. So technically, you just did what I asked you to do.
I'm relieved.
She said with a small smile. I came here to give you my thanks for helping me to hide here. Wilma looked surprised by that, but then her smile widened.
Do you want to come inside?
She asked. Sure. There was almost no one here. The children were probably in the forest or in the workshop. The whole place looked just as empty as when I had arrived here before, with the exception of a dazed Delia who was wobbling in the corner of a room with the baby. She looked sleep-deprived. I'm actually interested in what news has already spread about yesterday's incident, I began asking.
You mean Lady Rosamine being adopted by the Archduke?
Yes. I nodded. Wilma thought for a moment.
For now, only her attendants know.
Yeah, the temple still feels as if nothing happened, I remarked.
I think it seems more peaceful.
She did seem more relaxed than in previous days. Her face was lacking tension. You might be right, I agreed.
I must admit that since the foreign noble is gone, the temple feels safer.
She added with a bright smile. At the time, I didn't even think about how it made her feel when I told her that a foreign noble was there to take shrine maidens away. She must have been as terrified as me. I feel the same. I put on a similar smile, although mine was a bit fake. We chatted for a while, but then Wilma's duties called her away, so I left as well. I moved to the book room and spent the rest of my day there. Nothing against books, but I wished for some variety in how I spent my time. Or at least if there was some variety in the books there, as I didn't want to read random reports about the harvest. I just reread things from one of the Bibles and then went to my room. As it was getting late, I put away my blue robes, exposing my cheap clothes. Without attire, I went to draw water. No one should have a problem about me doing it without a blue robe. At least, I hoped a certain someone would not complain. Then, I finished all my chores and went to sleep. It was a calm day, yet something was missing. I was probably just hungry. That food from the stand wasn't enough. No. Docs, are you available now?
I'll do the episode then, the chapter.
Alright.
Rosina. Who wants to be Rosina?
I guess I could.
No, Ada Ferdinand is in here. Wheels?
Sure.
Yes, we all in? Already?
Yeah.
Okay. My adoption. When I woke up, everything seemed the same. Put my clothes on, and I wondered whether I shouldn't go to the forest. I already spent my last change yesterday on food. There was no need for me to go on a diet. As I was wondering about my plans, a great priest arrived with a summons. It appeared that Ferdinand was calling me to his office. Well, finally something to do. I followed behind the priest to the high priest's chambers, and then swiftly entered. Besides Ferdinand, there was also Sylvester and Garstedt. I didn't really like the look on their faces, but maybe I was just being paranoid again.
We have made the necessary arrangements, and the other party agreed to your adoption. A few days from now, you will be part of a mid-noble family.
Well, that didn't sound so bad. I guess I was Ilgner then. After all, they lost all those nobles and were struggling because of that. They couldn't exactly be choosy. My mind was slowly drifting to the forested region in the south. I was wandering among the trees and following my guide who was teaching me about the area. Though we would not go too far, since I was still afraid of larger fey beasts. Just somewhere nearby. Maybe I could look at that screaming fey plant. Sylvester, meanwhile, started explaining.
Karstedt was talking personally with Jeeb Hoisentak and...
Please, don't.
I interrupted him. I was being rude by stopping him like that. Once I realized that, a wave of unease went over me.
What?
Sylvester looked at me with surprise. Well, I had already interrupted him. I might as well stand my case.
Why would you send me there after my whole story about their involvement in that kidnapping? You really want to send me to a house that will get purged?
I was baffled that they would even suggest such an option.
If you fear for your safety, then we...
No, I don't want to be around people that I know will die. I don't want to repeat what happened with Jenny.
Crap, I need to stop interrupting. I was afraid that I annoyed him, or even worse, if Ferdinand and Karstedt thought I was too disrespectful to him.
Who's this Jenny?
Sylvester asked. Ferdinand crossed his arms while still watching me.
As one's attendant, she was lent to Mila for that role. Rosman told me that when there was assault, she restrained Mila and tried to give her to his soldiers.
And you knew she would do that?
Sylvester asked in shock. But they weren't getting the wrong idea here. Sure, the very first thing that blinked in my mind wasn't the emotional distress, but rather the map of Ehrenfest and location of the province, right between Daldorf and Gerlach. So yeah, I was scared like no one to go anywhere near that part of the duchy. It was like the worst place for me. When I suggested that I could take the heat by being the adopted commoner, I was making that proposition with the thought in my mind that I would be placed in a noble family where it wouldn't be such a big deal. But my main problem was that I couldn't handle being around people destined to die. It had been eating me alive around Jenny, so I tried to communicate that to them.
No, she was supposed to grab Rosamine and bring her to Bindewald. I wasn't supposed to be there, remember? I spent every day with her for months. I was going crazy with won't she, thinking about what she will do with guilt that I was just abandoning her to death, despite all those mistrustful thoughts about whether she will stab me in the back.
Yes, my safety was my priority, but even if they could guarantee it, I didn't want to go back to such a miserable situation.
I don't want to go through that again.
I proclaimed resolutely. Ferdinand scowled at me.
Do you think that we have an open adoption? Do you think that we just have open adoption options on our hands?
In his eyes, I was probably unreasonable.
Why not Illinger then?
I asked.
How do you know that they're friendly with commoners?
Because
He
Rosamine
asked
was.
back.
Because
I
Rosamine was.
stopped. Did I screw myself by mentioning those two options? He specifically avoided them. Was it because I knew about them with my knowledge, which logically meant that Rosamine had a connection to them? He wanted to push me away, not to wreak havoc.
If you're not happy with that option, you can still stay inside the temple.
He said with his arms still crossed. I wanted access to magic. But I needed to be a noble. I was torn. The pressure inside me was rising. The temple wouldn't be too bad. Rosamine, as High Bishop, should clear away everything that made the temple a nasty place. There was no safety here. It was peaceful.
I appreciate your hard work. I am grateful and I will accept the adoption.
I said with a plastered smile.
Finally, some reason. I will let you know about further details. You can leave now.
Ferdinand shooed me away. I turned and left the chambers. I opened the door myself and closed it behind me. The corridor in front of me was empty, so I just turned around to the closed door and aggressively flipped 2 middle fingers at them. It was such a childish thing to do, but I needed to vent my frustrations. And just like that, I could hear footsteps. I immediately swished my arms down, but the damage was already done. I looked to the left, and I could see 3 figures walking this way. It was Rosamine, with Fran, and Damuel.
Could I ask you to maybe not mention this to the 3 arch nobles inside with the authority to execute me on the spot?
I played it for a joke, but I genuinely didn't have the status to throw such tantrums. My interruptions and complaining about their offer was already enough to warrant a harsh response.
Don't worry, no one will tell.
Rosamine assured me. But it didn't ease my worries at all. They were like the worst trio in this regard. The first one was too afraid of Ferdinand to keep any secrets from him. The second was too loyal to Ferdinand to keep any secrets from him. And that was Rosamine, who already managed to tell him my secret.
Thank you, Lady Rosamine. I just said
I
anyways.
said to...
Sorry.
Please stop, I'm not even baptized yet.
I'm just training so I won't slip up later.
My anger was already gone, so I just played around.
What made you so angry?
Rosamine asked.
They arranged for me a noble adoption to the House of Joycentat.
She didn't react immediately, but after a second her expression got clearer.
Aren't those the nobles from your warning?
She widened her eyes.
Yes, they are.
What? Why would they do that?
Right? That's what I said!
I exclaimed, finally justified. I wasn't the weird one here. There was a second opinion to back me up, though we were both from a different world, so that amounted to nothing. There might be some noble circumstances I was not aware of. I didn't want to be foolish to act as if I knew better. That's why I had agreed to the offer That's why I had agreed with their offer.
Do you need any help?
Rosamine offered. I didn't exactly want her to go in there to speak on my behalf, especially since I didn't know if I was just the one in the wrong here. It would be more beneficial to just go with it and try for the best. So, if I actually would be a noble and enjoy some tuck, what would I need? Well, I had my occasional outbursts, but I thought that my manners were decent. It was because Sylvester allowed me to speak normally during our private meetings that I got carried away. I would not talk that way to other nobles. I knew how to read and write, which meant the only thing I lacked was music education.
Can I borrow Rosina and your Hartfield for some lessons? If it won't be too much of a bother?
I don't think Rosina will ever have a problem with more Harspiel lessons.
Rosamine smiled wryly.
Thank you. I'm grateful.
Just like I wasn't lucky enough to have hobbies that could be marketable in a pre-modern world, I also wasn't lucky enough to have a musical education for a head start. My only encounter with music was when I borrowed a guitar for a few weeks during my first year in college. It seemed fun during parties, so I wanted to try it. It ended pretty quickly when I wasn't able to hold bar chords properly, which made me unable to play most songs, so I gave up. This time, I had strong motivation, since it was necessary to not stand out too much.
Really, learning music requires a lot of training. It's not like with the regular tests where I was able to just cram it all the night before and then forget it all the day after.
The moment I said it, the realization appeared on my face. Both Fran and Damiel didn't look like they understood. How could they? They didn't actually know what I was talking about. But Rosamine knew exactly what despair was radiating out of me. She gave me a sympathetic look. Yeah, my knowledge of things would probably be less garbage if I didn't learn that way. But the fact that proper preparation in school would bite me even in my second life was just absurd. We parted ways as Rosamine was actually the one who had a scheduled meeting with her guardians. I moved to my room and waited there. Half a bell later, Rosina really did arrive. She wore a polite smile, but her eyes had an energetic spark in them. It was good to know that she was actually content. While Rosamine joked about her, and I was keenly aware from the story how much she loved music, I was still careful to not take it for granted. Oh, so you like music, so I can just take your time to teach me, right? I could see how such an attitude might lead to problems. After greetings, we began our lesson. First on music skills, then simple tunes. All my hopes were placed on the chance that this young, childish body had some talent in it, or at least it should be easier to learn something at 8 than during adulthood, when you wouldn't pick up things so easily anymore. Rosina didn't seem disappointed, and she commended me multiple times, but that was her job, having a pleasant attitude and fostering the skills of a new student. Of course, I would get a lot of praise so I wouldn't get discouraged and give up. We continued the lesson for the whole day. I had strong motivation to keep up since I would be leaving in a few days for the new family. They would no doubt be irked to house a commoner, so their appraisal of me would be biased from the start. I wanted to cover everything that could bring critique to an uneducated barbarian was entering their home. Till I was starving, since I spent the whole day in my room. I didn't go to the forest, and so I didn't get anything to eat. Well, it was the first day I went without food. People could probably fast for multiple days or even weeks, although I didn't really want to do that in my grow up period. After Rosina left, I still had my chores to do and had to prepare everything before I could go to sleep. I pushed through it even though I didn't have energy, and as a reward, I could slowly drift into my dreams while my stomach was rumbling. The next day, Rosina arrived with help. A shrine maiden with dark green hair brought a basket and left without a word. She looked a little bit tense. If she was Rosamine's attendant, They can only have been Monica, though without introductions, that was just my guess.
What's in the basket?
Rosina.
I was waiting for I asked.
Oh,
My apologies. We spent the whole day yesterday in training, and I was reprimanded back at Lady Rosamine's chambers that I only focused on the music and didn't come back to eat.
food?
They prepared sandwiches for me, and I noticed you didn't eat either during my stay, so I brought extra if that's acceptable.
Food, yes!
I am grateful.
I was basically copying her polite smile, but on the inside, I was throwing a big celebration. We continued with our lessons for the rest of the day. During breaks, I asked about whether Rosamine had already started with her noble education. I craved advice. My bar was thankfully set much lower since I didn't have to act like an archnoble, or even worse, a member of the archducal family. But any recommendations from them would be invaluable. I had said that my manners were fine, but obviously I never lived among Met nobles. So it would be better to be overprepared than going there and making a subpar impression right from the start. Rosina gave me a few tips of her own, so at least my confidence was boosted a bit. The intensive lessons continued for almost a week. The fact that I knew there was a time limit made me desperately throw myself at the practice. Eventually, I was summoned to the High Priest's chamber again. There was to talk about further details I was awaiting. As I arrived, filled with anticipation. Ferdinand's office was cleared of personnel, and I sat down in front of him.
A carriage from Gib Jostentak will arrive roughly in 3 days. Expect to depart on the 4th day from now.
Okay, I will be ready.
Ferdinand looked down at the parchments in front of him.
There is still so much to do here with all the arrangements for Rosamine, but I will try to visit and perform your noble baptism before the end of spring. It would be better if your baptism matched your actual birth season.
Will I also go back to age 7, like Rosamine?
I was bigger than her, so I actually looked 8, but 1 year change could still be hidden.
In her case, we are doing that to hide her origins. It would be pointless to mask your age and change your name when we are already announcing to them that you are a commoner.
For them, it was inconsequential. I didn't know if I agreed, as it put me a year behind. I didn't have to match the skill and experience of fresh newcomers in noble society who were 7 years old, while my actual peers aged 8.
True. Well, at least I don't have to do the winter debut since I'm no longer 7.
I tried to find some silver lining in that situation.
Winter debuts for all children baptized that year.
He retorted.
Seriously? I have to go on stage in front of 800 nobles and be the only 8-year-old in that group?
My chest was already hurting when I thought about the possibility. Did the former Blue Priest go through the same treatment? Just thinking about it made me cringe. When I imagined some random teenager performing there in the middle of 7-year-old children, who were all much better than him, because no one ever expected him to enter the noble society. So, no musical training. I would throw up from shame being there. I could probably call myself lucky that it was only a year later. Still, I really hoped that nothing would change about Rosamine giving an accidental lesson during her debut. Please, let everyone stare at her and forget me.
What are you thinking?
Ferdinand asked suspiciously. I needed a fast change of subject. Thankfully, I had one question in mind that I wanted to address.
Thinking about my temple duties.
Your temple duties?
Yes,
He
as
raised
a
his
blue,
eyebrows.
yes, as a blue shrine maiden.
My underlying reason was pretty simple. I had no idea what I could expect from Gide Joycentak and his family. It was entirely possible that he would just throw me in a dungeon and use me as a mana better. The temple was my lifeline. If I had a duty, like, for example, being required to supply my mana during the dedication ritual, then they would be forced to send me back to not cause strife with the head of temple, who was a member of the archducal family. Then it would be just an easy fix of me getting to the temple and refusing to go back. I was sure that if I pleaded Rosamine, she would back me up, and I would be safe here.
You don't have to burden yourself with that. You weren't a real Bushai maiden to begin with, since you didn't have your fealty ceremony. The only reason why you had robes was the will of the former High Bishop, who is no more, and Sylvester is playing along with him.
Don't do this to me. I didn't want to reveal to him that I wanted my blue robes as a backup because I thought their adoption options sucked. My mind was desperately trying to come up with some good reason.
Could we perform the fealty ceremony now?
Do you have any idea how busy I am?
It didn't seem worth the effort to him. It irritated me that I always came down to mana. It was so incredibly simple. You had a lot? Sure, let's hear your idea. We can accommodate you. You had a little? Why are you wasting my time? I pushed away those thoughts so the frustration would not show on my face.
Well, I realize that in the grand scheme of things, my mana supply is quite negligible. But I just thought that since we lost the former High Bishop's supply, the mana shortage became an even bigger problem. So any little bit would help as a replacement.
I looked at him in anticipation, but I couldn't exactly discern if there was enough. So I tried another reason.
And it would mean that I wouldn't need that magic tool that siphons mana from noble children. I could just offer it to the temple.
Ferdinand tapped his finger on the table.
That's actually a reasonable proposition. I have already acquired a ring, but I didn't have time for a magic tool.
Magic ring? Yes, give me. I forced my mouth to stay still so it wouldn't change into a grin. My neutral smile held.
Shouldn't those be the responsibility of my new family?
I asked to cover for that internal struggle.
First, it persuaded them by ensuring their side that we will be covering the cost of magic tools that you will need upon your arrival.
I was indebted to someone either way. It was probably better that my adoptive family wouldn't have too much cause to complain about how big of a financial burden I was for them. Still, I couldn't say that I felt comfortable being that burden to someone else.
And you're right. Well, not much. Your mana should ease some burden on us, since there are responsibilities outside of the temple. It will at least cover some of the costs of those magic tools.
The idea of paying with my mana was fine by me. Mana naturally accumulated inside me, unlike money, which I currently had 0 of. Ferdinand stood up and walked around the table.
I could give you the ring early, just like Rossman.
He stopped and once again looked at me with suspicious expression.
How far into the future did your readings go?
Didn't you say that I shouldn't talk about the possible future?
I did not ask you about the future. You clearly know what I meant by that.
He swiftly shut down my deflection.
I ended right as Rosamine's second year of the Royal Academy ended.
It was pretty easy to remember my stopping point since it was marked by a large-scale terrorist attack with a bunch of gigantic Fae beasts and suicidal attackers. Hard to forget. I hadn't mentioned that to anyone since that was in the category of possible future. They had scared me enough during our information sharing that I didn't actually want to talk about it. The worst case scenario, I would mention it. They would investigate it, and then the attack would happen. Suddenly, there would be a trace towards a bunch of nobles from Ehrenfest who had been mentioning a terrorist attack in the background before the royal family actually got attacked.
So, your knowledge of magic goes up to the second year.
He said with a thinking expression.
No, not at all.
I immediately retorted.
When I read something like, and then he placed a magic circle to speed up the whole process, it tells me nothing about how such a circle would look like or what I would need to make it. At best, it tells me something like that exists. My whole knowledge of the Royal Academy can be summarized as me knowing the names of classes in the curriculum.
I had access to Fae stones and mana for 2 years. Did you see me make a single magic tool or a potion? Though, I went with a less direct response.
You were to read a fictional story about a knight hunting a Fae beast. Would that teach you the required knowledge for the knight's course?
I see. That clears that up. Singer Roseman effortlessly broke established rules around magic. I was quite wary of someone who had access to even more of our weird ideas.
He said that, but he didn't look that wary. Also, I did plan to break established rules. So I wanted to at least mention now that so he wouldn't think later I had been lying to him.
Oh, I do plan to copy your ideas. I just need to wait until I acquire a staff outlier and the proper knowledge. Though before the academy, I don't remember her doing anything more out of the ordinary than her blessings, Shizaria's shield, and using the magic tools you provided.
Ferdinand closed his eyes and then sighed.
That doesn't ease my worries at all, but it is somewhat reassuring that neither of you can do more damage unsupervised until the academy.
Haha, that's a lie.
He then went and produced a magic ring for me. It had a nice green color, and it shrunk the moment I put it on my finger. Yes, magic! Though the only thing I could do with it was bless someone during a meeting. Knowing that helped to temper my excitement, and I was able to go once again avoid a grin on my face.
With this out of the way, we can perform the fealty ceremony.
So we have to prepare it and move things here?
Why? All is ready in the High Bishop's chambers, and there is no longer anyone there to stop us from doing so.
He said, with a certain satisfaction in his voice. We really did speedruns, these things. Ferdinand said he was busy after all. I was officially a real shrine maiden just a few moments later, though it took me a half a year from when I entered the temple, but who cared? I returned to Rosina in my room in a great mood and full of excitement. Meanwhile, she was playing a beautiful but sad melody that was filling the room. It immediately brought me back to the winter debut. My chest was hurting just from the very thought. 800 nobles looking at me. Many of them would probably know about me being a commoner. Many more would know that I was a year older than the rest. It was excruciating.
Rosina, could you please arrange a song for me?
Oh my, do you also have the same talent to come up with the new melodies like Lady Rosamine?
You know what? Yes, actually. I could even whistle a bunch of songs that were stuck in my head for years. Did I finally find some piece of knowledge that could be useful? I just needed to decide on something nice, catchy, and simple. Then I would practice just that one song for the rest of the year until the winter. And I will be passable. The nobles in the audience would be like, isn't that one commoner? Oh, at least she didn't embarrass herself among the real nobles. Let's gossip about something else. What about that small girl? That's the Archduke's daughter, right? I nodded to myself. Rosina readied herself with a hopeful expression. She still wore her polite smile, but her eyes were burning with anticipation. I settled on the song from the Titanic. That melody was stuck in my head for 2 decades, so I could at least put it to good use. I hummed the tune for a few minutes, and Rosina put it in proper form. We were both happy with the outcome.
I must admit, I'm so excited. Is this a love song?
She divulged by playing it.
Yes, it feels like it, right?
I replied with satisfaction. Rosina nodded.
Can I also play it, Lady Rosamine?
She asked. I wasn't exactly sure about that movie, how that movie did in Japan. Was that song also blasted for years on the radio there? Or did no one care?
Sure, if you want. You arranged it. But I want to perform it during my winter debut, though, so just don't publicize it before that.
I spent the rest of my days in a simple loop. I practiced the song until I got sick of it. Then we moved to some other songs. And after I had recuperated, I went back to repeating the song. It wasn't the most healthy approach to learning. The better option would have been doing it in small doses over a long period of time. But I had a limited amount of that. Rosina was a talented professional, and I had no idea what kind of teachers, if any, people had in noble families, so far away from the nobles' quarter. So I wanted to gain as much as possible out of her. And hey, she wasn't having fun with it. And hey, she was having fun with it. So was probably doing a good thing.
Alright, so we need Aaron, Geeb, Joyce, and Tack, and Lem. Oh, hey, the new person, Clatter, you wanna voice act?
If you want me to, who do you need?
You don't.
We need a Aaron. I think that's probably like the driver. We need a Geeb, Joyce, and Tack, and we need a Lem.
I can totally do a Lem.
Alright. I don't know, say, Risa, you wanna be Geeb, Joyce, and Tack?
I could try.
And then we just need someone to do Aaron, I think.
I'll do Aaron.
Alright. Yeah. Oh, and then also, wait, Clatter, do you want to narrate this chapter as well? I think you're next in the rotation.
Sure, so I'm reading everything that's not dialogue, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. When the day of my departure came, I put all my belongings into a single bag and went outside. One good thing about not owning anything, it was stupidly easy to move. Just put everything in a bag and you're good to go. I still wore my blue robe. Blue priests were looked down upon by the real nobles, but it was still my most presentable attire. If I showed up in just the clothes that were hidden under the robe, it would be even worse. It was early in the morning since we had a long route ahead of us. I greeted the servant who was going to drive the carriage for me. He was an old man with light blue hair, and he looked tired. It was no wonder, since he arrived just yesterday after almost a week of travel, only to set out again on his journey back the next day. I wasn't exactly enthusiastic either. The journey to Haldanzel was still fresh in my mind. It was long. I didn't really need another boring sightseeing trip. Yes, there will be a lot of farmland and a lot of forest. I can predict the future. I didn't need any knowledge of the future for that. I was about to climb into the carriage when Rosamine arrived at the scene with Rosina and Daniel in tow.
As for my farewell gift, Rosina prepared for you a few practice songs.
Rosamine said while Rosina was giving me the sheets of paper. There was more than just musical notes. In between, there were also graphical illustrations and annotations. Rosina was probably worried that after all these days of traveling, I would forget how to read the notes. Maybe she was right. I was cramming till yesterday, so it was perfectly fine at the moment. But after a week, who knows?
Thank you ever so much.
I was delighted, really, I was. It was just, I didn't have anything to give in return.
There's also that one song included.
Rosamine said knowingly.
Were you familiar with it from your dreams?
There you go.
Did the mic work there? Or did my mic cut out?
No.
I didn't hear someone in my dreams.
No.
Oh, sorry. That's my mic. Like, were you familiar with it from your dreams?
I tried to ask in a roundabout way. She thought for a moment, and then she smiled.
Someone in my dream bought a VHS of it and was constantly pestering me to watch it with her.
I nodded with a smile. I could guess who. Damuel and Rosina didn't pick up on the abbreviation she used. It would have startled me if they did. And so I departed from the temple. We went out the east gate. The road looked much more busy than the one leading to the south gate. But soon even this one stopped being properly paved. After a bell, we reached our first town, which I guessed to be HoS. We were really in a hurry. I expected it to take half a day like in the story, though they went at walking speed. I really hope they managed it well. I could have gone for more details in my warning, but just the general "communicate more" sounded more universal. Focusing on one particular mistake would just postpone the disaster. It would ultimately manifest somewhere else. We rushed through the town and later linked up with the road that headed south. From then on, it was just the sightseeing I had been so afraid of. I tried to strike up a conversation with the servant. His name was Aaron, and he was a commoner. I was immediately interested in how commoners were treated in Joyce Untax's estate. His reply was that the relationship was quite professional, and for all his life, he had never been mistreated. That was great. If the bar was polite professionalism, I was content with that. All I wanted was to not be abused. If that was met, everything else was a bonus. Our carriage stopped for the night near a small inn in a farming town. The owner recognized Aaron, so I assumed we were retracing the exact same stopping spots he had visited on his way to Aaronfest. He paid for 2 rooms, and we began our preparations for the night.
Do you need help with that?
He asked when he saw me drawing water outside.
No need, thank you.
I wasn't exactly sure how I should act towards him. He was the driver, not my attendant, and I wasn't adopted yet, so we were both commoners. I chose to play it safe and did everything by myself. I didn't want to impose. We were moving swiftly day by day. This was much faster than when I went to Haldunzel, since there was no snow to slow us down, nor any detours to keep us occupied. It felt much more boring. Unlike Erie, who had accompanied me on that journey, Aaron wasn't really interested in playing games to kill time. He was focused on the road and completely lost in his own thoughts. Nothing to do. I just stared out the window. Then I grabbed my slate and gave myself random equations to solve. After a while, I took out the sheets from Rosina and hummed those practice songs. And eventually, I just practiced greetings and blessed the seat beside me, just because. I was sure that whoever would sit there next would truly gain Flutrain's favor. Or not. After a few more days, Aaron informed me that we had crossed from the Central District to his home province, and that the next day we would reach Joyce Untax's estate. Tensed, since my first meeting with my new family was right around the corner. Last time it went horribly. Would it be too much to ask to meet someone like Elvira instead of Veronica here? There? Well, at least I wasn't bored anymore. Instead, I was anxious to the point that I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I was dazed and my head was just occasionally bumping into the wall as the carriage was shaking on the road. And then, finally, I saw the white buildings in front of us. That must have been our destination. The road turned slightly, and a nearby town appeared once we moved around a swath of trees that obstructed our vision. Now we could clearly see a town with dozens of various buildings on the left, and then a large garden on the right, with ivory buildings farther in sight. Carriage moved through the town center, and a little bit farther, there was an opened gate into the garden. By the time the carriage arrived in front of the main building, which was a large mansion with 2 floors, a small group of people went outside to greet us. Judging by their fancy clothes, they were all nobles. The man in the middle with dark blue hair was probably the Gibe. There was a certain curiosity in everyone's eyes, although no one really looked pleased. Well, here goes nothing. I put on a polite smile and waited for Aaron to open the door for me. He hadn't done it once during the journey. When in the presence of nobles, he smoothly moved to the right position and let me out. I kept my balance, moved down just as smoothly as him with my head up and my smile on. I wanted to present myself in such a way that they wouldn't think they had gotten stuck with some uncouth child. I knelt and crossed my arms.
May I pray for a blessing and appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the pure rivers flowing from Flutrain, the goddess of water?
I said without a single hiccup. A lengthy pause followed. It got unnerving really fast. I had to force myself not to look up. Eventually, the man in the middle spoke the words.
You may.
I relaxed a little and poured my mana into my ring.
O Flutrain, goddess of water, may you grant this new meeting with your blessing.
And the green lights flowed down slowly on him. I thought it was flawless. Pleased with the outcome, I introduced myself. But the man didn't look happy at all.
They really gave you a ring. What a waste.
He said, clearly disgruntled. He then looked at my driver.
Aaron, take her to the buildings for servants and have someone explain her the new responsibilities.
As you wish.
Aaron?
Oh. Oh shit, I was muted. My fault, my fault. As you wish.
Wasn't the greatest welcome I'd ever gotten, but I had expected a dungeon and being locked away as a matter battery. This was actually so much better than my nightmarish imagination. Nobles went back inside, with their curiosity sated, and all I could do was follow my guide. I took my bag and walked behind him into a nearby building. That was behind another mansion. It was probably less fancy than mansions for nobles. Since all buildings here were white, there wasn't much difference in the first place, or at first glance. We entered a corridor and continued walking until we arrived somewhere that looked like a changing room. There, we met a young man who was around 20 years old with brown hair tinged with orange. He was wearing a servant uniform, just like Aaron. This Lem?
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
so.
Who have you brought? He asked with curious eyes.
This is Mila. She will be joining your staff as a servant.
I stepped forward.
Nice to meet you.
Really? A blue robe? He said in utter disbelief. Pardon me. My name is Lem. I'm in charge of the commoner servants here. Nice to meet you. With that out of the way, Aaron nodded to us and left the room. I stood there, wondering what to do next. Lem was looking over my blue robe. It must have been a weird sight. Can you even work? I heard blue priests and shrine maidens don't do manual work. Why would they send me someone like that? I don't fancy their farts too much. He was really blunt in his speech.
I can.
I replied confidently. He looked doubtful. We'll see. It would be a bother to teach you everything from scratch. Put his hand on the back of his head and looked around. First, let's find some matching clothes for you. I guess you are used to something more fancy, but you will have to get used to this. He tried to sound supportive. Joke's on you! Those clothes for servants are much better quality than anything I own. I was given a attire, which, for the first time, I didn't have to hide under my blue robe. It was definitely an upgrade for me, and I didn't even have to pay for it. Lem showed me around, and then led me to my new room. It was much smaller than my room in the temple, but it had all I needed. There was a simple bed, a table with a single chair, and a wardrobe. Taking care of all of it actually decreased my chores in comparison to the temple. And, well, we were still in an ivory building. It was a far cry from me sleeping on the wooden floor in the lower city. I changed into my servant's clothes, left the room while Lem was waiting outside in the corridor. He pointed towards my room. It isn't much compared to what you're used to, but it's actually much better than when I started working here. Back then, we lived in a wooden shack. The Geeb fired so many commoners that there are now spare rooms even in this building. Sure, it was nice that now basically every servant had an ivory building, but I didn't like the sound of it.
But why did he fire commoners?
Beats me. But it started after one of the Geeb's younger sisters was married away. They hired more and more noble attendants, saying that they are too high in status to have so many commoners around. I began to understand why Lem was so appalled with me being a blue shrine maiden. He was losing workers for manual work. The first new hire he got was someone known to do even less manual work than a noble attendant. What a lovely environment for a commoner to get adopted into. Thanks, Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Karstead, whichever of you has had this idea. But no one here had hit me yet. So that still made Geeb Joyce and Tack the best father I'd had so far in this world. We moved to another corridor, and Lem gave me a mop. Noble attendants have all these magic tools that make their work look easy. We have to do it the hard way. He frowned a little while looking me over once again. The bucket is outside. Do you know how to draw water?
Yes.
Great. I will come later to check your work. He didn't really have much faith in my skills. So I went outside to draw water and began mopping. I finished the whole corridor, but no one came to check. Should I just continue somewhere else? When I worked in the tavern in the lower city, I matched the other employees. I didn't want to go full in, nor did I want to be a sluggard. But here, no one was around to copy. As I was standing there, Lem came back. He really did look surprised. Finished already? Looks like I don't have to worry about another blue shrine maidens being useless. Thanks, I guess. I smiled in response. I spent the rest of the day mopping the floor. The rest of the day mopping the floor. And I went to the commoner hall where other servants were eating. No one really gave me attention outside of a few glances, so I just sat down and gobbled up my food. After dinner, I went to my room. I sat on the bed and sighed. I wasn't put in a dungeon, nor was I being abused or harmed, but still, it felt like a waste. I wanted a noble education, so I would not die from shame during the winter debut and socializing. No noble would ever praise another noble for sweeping the floor expertly.
All right, so we a bunch of new roles. Cook, shop owner.
I'm back.
We need a dais, attendant 1, young room. Who is attendant 1 and 2? Are those just? Oh, those ones, yeah. Okay, so young woman, cook's helper, attendant 2. Who wants to be
I
a
could try one.
Yeah.
I could
Who
try a
want-
cook.
Yeah, cook. All right. Who wants to be Cindy? You think you have a good dais voice?
Sure. Yeah.
I think you seem to be the youngest guy here. We need a cook. We need a cook, shop owner. The attendant 1 and 2 are the ones that are chasing after a dais when he goes out to greet
Wait,
me
are
up.
you able to hear me?
Yeah.
I said I would like to try a cook.
Got it. Okay.
The cook.
So we need shop owner, attendant 1, young woman, cook's helper, attendant 2.
Could be young woman, I guess.
Yeah, got it. All right, young woman. So, shop owner. Bien.
Sure.
We need attendant 1, cook's helper, and attendant 2.
I could be any of those you want me to be.
Sure. You want to be the cook's helper?
Sure.
We just need attendant 1 or 2.
I'll be
Alright.
attendant 1.
Wait, no. I think
Oh,
I'm pretty sure the
yeah,
attendant.
yeah.
They're a dais attendant, I believe. Faerun.
Yeah, sure.
Faerun's
Attendant 1?
attendant 1. Faye. Do you want to be attendant 2?
I'm not sure which one is that.
But
sure.
I think.
Actually,
I think
it might be better if Faerun is the cook's helper, and I'm attendant 2, because the cook's helper is a man and the attendant 2 is a woman.
Oh, okay, sure.
You only have one line, Faye, if you want to be the cook's helper.
I'm fine with it. Just tell me what it is.
I got it. Alright, so then Wheels, you're next up on the rotation.
Oh wait, maybe I messed that up. It looks like that's young woman. Where's attendant? I'm trying to look at the coloring. I can't see where attendant 2.
I think there are days as attendants or. Oh no, it's attendant. Noble attendant that she talks to about the. She talks to them about magic tools.
Oh, it's Anlia's husband.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay, never mind, Faye, I lied. Do you want to be that, and I'll do the one line?
Okay. You want the smaller or the
Yep.
bigger roll? Okay.
Yes.
Do you want the smaller or the bigger roll?
I don't mind. Either.
All right, sure. Then I guess you can be attendant 2, who is Anlia's husband.
Sure.
All right, got it. So, anyways, now let's go. Wheels, you're up on the rotation.
All right. Oh, hold on. My children opened the door, so yeah. Don't get loud. Okay. Sorry. Okay, servant's life. After sweeping came laundry. I was sent to help a couple of young women in charge of that, then helping in the garden. After that, I was sent as an assistant to the kitchen. It seemed like Lim was trying to find a place where I would fit, and he sent me each day to a different job. I didn't mind the variety, but every time I arrived somewhere, people looked annoyed that they had to take in a newcomer. They first made me do something unnecessary, so I was not in their way. Then they finally figured out how to use me properly, and suddenly it was dinner time, and I went back to my room. I rarely ever went near the mansion where the Geeb lived, though I was sent to the mansions of other nobles quite frequently, usually as a part of a group that helped a lay noble attendant with his or her task. Their behavior was actually pretty benign. I expected some animosity towards commoners, but they treated us just as regular colleagues. Well, as subordinates, of course, but just like any other servant. Their job was usually to operate magic tools, like those that connected a tap to hot water somewhere else in the building, and we were called if it needed to be used for something out of the ordinary. I thought that it would actually speed things up quite a bit if we could also call upon them to help with our work. Obviously, it was just a thought. A noble servant calling a commoner servant to move something, sure. A commoner servant calling a noble servant because he needed hot water, that would be quite a show.
So, how are things?
Lim sat near me during dinner.
I think, did I mess up somewhere?
For some reason, I associated a boss asking an employee about how are things, with there being a problem with that particular employee.
No, at least no one has complained yet.
Lim said with a grin, then he got more serious.
It's just sometimes when I look, you have this dissatisfied look on your face.
Just so you know, that's my resting face. I went with a more normal response.
Sorry, I'll stop doing that.
Nah, you don't have to. It would be a problem if you were like that in the presence of a noble. But around them, you always have a presentable smile.
That was like the most basic skill everyone who ever interacted with a noble had, so I was surprised he had thought I would just stare at a noble with an irritated expression. They could execute me on the spot. Obviously, I would have a pleasant facade on.
You are looking for such things?
I was usually just focusing on my job or on the noble nearby. There wasn't much time to look at other servants.
Of course. It would be on me that I sent you there in the first place if some noble gets annoyed.
He then got more contemplative.
It feels as if you used to be an attendant to a noble.
Nope. Wait, I did math for a noble. Does that count?
It was probably better to go with that than to say I used to pretend to be a spy for the former High Bishop. My real experience was me forcing my behavior around Jenny.
I guess. All that matters is that I don't have to fear when I send you to the mansion.
Lim didn't pry any further.
So what do I do tomorrow?
I asked to change the subject.
Cleaning duty in the kitchen.
The next morning, I went to draw water and began my work in the kitchen. While noble kitchens were usually clean to begin with, the cooks were keeping them so. It didn't mean that they didn't get dirty. There was plenty of stuff to do. That's why it irked me a lot when one cook shouted at me.
Hey kid, you don't do anything useful. Get me those spices from the market. Someone forgot to stock them.
I nodded and took a few small containers from him. Then I headed to Lim to ask what to do, since I myself didn't have any money.
Those idiots. Buying wares isn't a job for you.
He took me to a lay noble attendant, but the man was busy, so it eventually became a job for me. The attendant gave me a few coins and sent me to buy the spices. I power walked through the garden and right through the gate. The market was nearby. Since this town was so small in comparison to the lower city, it wasn't hard to find the correct shop.
I haven't seen you here before.
The
Yes,
shop owner.
Yes, I was hired by the Geeb 2 weeks ago.
Oh? They hired someone? They usually just fire people.
I heard.
I said with a mixed smile.
Well, good luck then.
He filled my containers with the proper spices, and then I began to march right back. When I was in the middle of the garden, I heard a boyish voice on my right.
Halt!
I turned, and there was a boy, maybe a year older than me, in noble clothes. He had brown hair, dark red eyes, and an excited grin on his face. And then I noticed a wooden sword in his right hand. My face immediately warped into a polite smile, and I knelt. On the inside, I was already grumbling. The attendant was waiting for his money, the cook was waiting for the spices, lunch was closing in, and if the meal wasn't ready and the noble complained, then I would get the blame. I didn't have time for whatever the boy wanted.
You were supposed to kneel. You're supposed to freeze, not kneel.
He said with a disappointed voice.
My apologies.
No problem. Do you want to train sword fighting with me?
Yeah, sword fighting sounds like fun, but I have work.
I would like to, but the cook in the kitchen waits for these spices to finish the meal.
The boy didn't look antagonistic, so I tried to reason with him.
Sorry, I didn't want to cause you trouble.
Wow, he actually was pretty reasonable,
I am grateful.
I said with relief.
What about after lunch?
He tried again. Oh, I was sure that the moment his attendants would find out about him playing with a commoner, there would be a riot, but I couldn't just outright refuse him.
Wouldn't your attendants have a problem with that?
He looked surprised by my question.
Why would they? Mother said we were going to be siblings.
Was he Give Joyce and Talk's son? And did that mean that someone here actually took my adoption seriously? Or was his mother telling him it sarcastically and the boy didn't get the hint?
Was she talking about me?
I tried to make sure. He rested the sword on his arm.
She said a young girl, she said a girl younger than me joined the servants, and you were the only one I found.
Yes, I was the only one that joined recently, so at least it was certain that they talked about me. I should probably try to make a good impression. If at least one family member thought better of me, that would help.
We could.
I started.
Dorotheus, please do not talk before commoner servants, and let us return.
His attendants finally caught up with him. That was the end of my try. They took him away, and I continued to the kitchen. The cook took the containers from me, and his mood immediately improved. I went back to Lim, who once again brought me to the attendant who had given me the coins. I returned his change, and he went to write down the expense. I was glad there were no complications, like him suddenly announcing that he had given me more, or that he didn't remember sending me to buy spices and then demanding it all back. The job was finished, but Adeus didn't show up in the subsequent days. If my expectations were correct, they explained to him that his mother was joking and he would avoid me from now on. My time on kitchen duty was extended. It kind of reminded me of my job in the tavern where I also was mostly relegated to cleaning dishes. The difference was that back then it was done with a close enough attitude, while whoever would try giving a noble a almost clean plate would probably have a desslish. A young woman that was cleaning there with me was constantly complaining.
The grease won't come off.
She said with frustration as she was scrubbing the pot. Pour more hot water on it. Your water is already cold. A cook's helper was watching her from behind. He was probably waiting for the end of her shift.
I know, but this is the last pot. I would have to draw more water, find more wood, and heat it just for this one.
She stared at the pot, and then she turned to me.
Hey kid, take it from me.
Sure.
Not like I wanted to, but I didn't want to start a beef with someone in my workplace. She then left with the helper. My water was also too cold, so I ended up doing all that work with the heating anyway. It would have been so much easier with those magic tools the attendants used. I had ignored them so far to not overstep my boundaries. The last thing I wanted was some noble getting angry at me for touching something without permission, but that greasy pot was the last straw. I asked Lim about it during dinner.
Could I use magic tools for my work?
His brows furrowed and he shook his head.
Only nobles can use them since they require mana.
That wasn't highlighted. I'm a blue shrine maiden. I do have mana. I meant whether I could get permission.
The realization lightened his face.
That's a question.
He stroked his chin for a while, then he just shrugged.
I'll ask the attendant who usually deals with me.
The next morning, I was called by Lim, and we both went to meet the attendant. Lim asked for permission on my behalf, and the man in charge didn't look against it, though he seemed doubtful.
I'm going to take this line even though I don't think it's Lem's. Can she even operate them?
He asked.
She's a blue shrine maiden, so she has mana.
Lim repeated what I said to him. The attendant turned to me.
This isn't just some tool that takes your mana automatically. Otherwise, any unbaptized child could bump into it and accidentally turn it on.
The thought of some noble toddler accidentally flooding the house was honestly quite funny, but my expression didn't change at all. I was still listening to him with my neutral smile.
Blue priests and shrine maidens don't learn moving their mana, no?
He asked, Dude, I died my first face stone before I even entered the temple.
Generally, no, but I was taught to supply mana.
I replied calmly.
Well, let's see.
He moved to the nearby room and we followed behind.
This tool is for drawing water. Pour mana into this face stone and you get hot water. Pour mana into this face stone and you get cold water. You will also need to withdraw your mana to turn it off. If you can't do the second part, I can't give you permission. I don't want to be called to some leak if you can't turn it off.
So I just pour in my mana?
That seemed easy enough. I was afraid there were some advanced instructions that only someone with an attendant course knew how to handle.
Yes, there are more complex tools that requires more specific handling, but all tools in this mansion are simple to handle.
His words reassured me, and I poured my mana into the face stone. The water began to flow. The watching noble nodded with approval, but he was clearly surprised. He probably expected at least some struggle on my part. Lim behind him was grinning with excitement. I then withdrew my mana, and the flow of water stopped. The attendant was astonished.
Pushing is one thing, then withdrawing?
He mumbled to himself.
Am I allowed to use them?
I asked cautiously. I didn't want to sound too pleased, but on the inside the word easy was repeated a lot.
It makes your work more efficient, so yes, you have my permission.
That he actually cared about his craft instead of trying to think of some arbitrary reason why it couldn't be allowed immediately shot my opinion of him way up there.
I thank you ever so much.
Lim and I went back to our station.
This will actually help a lot. For now, you are again on cleaning duty in the kitchen. Meanwhile, I will talk around with the other staff and see where we can improve.
There was bumbling excitement inside of me. I wanted to show off a little. I arrived in the kitchen and announced that I got permission from an attendant to use magic tools. I poured hot water for myself and another woman who was cleaning beside me. I felt as if I suddenly had superpowers. Then we got to cleaning plates. Later, I got a visit from Lim, who made a new schedule for me. I was basically just touring around and turning on various tools for commoner servants. It was kind of silly that turning on the tap for water or using a lighter felt almost like sci-fi technology, when back in my world it was just a given that such mundane things existed. And I finally didn't feel like an unwanted package every time I was sent to help someone. They actually looked glad when they saw me arrive.
I need a short break.
Yeah, got
Abby.
it. Okay. So, Fairy, you wanna narrate next?
We need a new lamp.
Yeah, I gotta go in 5 minutes.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Well, nice having you here.
Thank you for having me.
Bien.
I could do it. Just
Oh,
give me
look,
a minute.
wait. Want to reprise your role as Ferdinand?
What?
Faye, do you want to reprise your role as Ferdinand?
I don't understand the question.
Do you want to be Ferdinand again?
Yes.
All right. Got it. Fairy, you're up. Barry?
Barry?
You there? Or should we just restart the cycle? Faye, you wanna narrate a chapter? Or I guess we could just go back up to Cindy.
Maybe without Martha as well, should be something.
Alright, sure, I guess you're up again, Cindy.
Alright. I finished cleaning yet another corridor, and it was time for dinner. I sat in my regular place in the common hall and dug into my food. Some people at the nearby table were talking about their day off and planning to visit a pub in town. I didn't know what exactly there was to plan since the town was so close. If they really wanted to, they could go there every night. I couldn't, since I didn't have the money. Would I even get paid like the rest of the servants after my first month? Or did G. Hoisentak think that by adopting me, he just gained free labor that worked for free in housing and food? While I was pondering that, Lem arrived and sat nearby.
We were asked to help with moving and cleaning in the main mansion tomorrow. They expect some important guests, and apparently it wasn't short notice.
His mind was probably running a checklist of everything he needed to organize since he looked distracted. After a while, he turned to me.
It's a really good thing that you got permission to use those magic tools.
I smiled proudly. The next morning,
I'm
a
back.
group. Oh. The next morning, our group of cleaners and movers arrived in the Jeeves mansion. I had to admit the interior looked elegant. With what I knew about the family, I expected some opulent display of wealth that was all over the place just to imitate archnoble status, and falling flat. Instead, it was quite pleasing, with only a few tapestries and some ornaments arranged on the sides. Most of the floor was covered in carpets. The big hall in the middle that connected both the floors with two staircases was bustling with activity. The lay attendants and commoners, servants under them, were in full cleaning mode. When I looked at them, it immediately seemed unnecessary in a world where one art attendant could cast a single washing spell and the floor would be clean in a few seconds. Though, an arch noble would obviously not work as an attendant for a med noble. Everything here always ended with mana and status. After I helped with some tasks, I was sent to do regular work, so I took a mop and moved to a corridor that led to a waiting room for guests. While I did my mopping, I was dreaming about using that cleaning spell a few years down the line. On average, the magic here was used to recreate the bare bones of my past lifestyle. Running water, toilets, fridge. Hey, communication through birds. Not really something groundbreaking. But a spell that cleans the whole room in 10 seconds? That kind of stuff would even be a hit in the modern world. And high beasts and teleportation circles. That would be all the rage. Who wouldn't want to have a personal plane under their belt? Though we'd probably end up with some shitty unpaved roads like here if those power were use those.
What are you doing here in that ridiculous attire?
A familiar voice full of exasperation tore me out of my daydreaming.
I thought Faye was gonna be Ferdinand again now that he is back.
Oh, okay.
Faye.
Are you doing Ferdinand?
Yeah.
I reflexively knelt down and crossed my arms. Was that Ferdinand's voice?
Stand.
I looked up and it was him, in his blue robes. I tried to do a polite greeting, but he interrupted me.
What's the point of you trying standard etiquette when you are sweeping the floors dusted as a commoner servant?
True, a servant was expected to just kneel and shut up, not to greet noble guests.
You were supposed to act noble-like to counterbalance your commoner background. How should your noble family regard you if you do things like this?
He was looking at me as someone who completely wasted his effort.
But the Geeb was the one who assigned me to the position of a commoner servant.
I tried to argue.
That doesn't make any sense.
Ferdinand's expression was one of utter bewilderment. Why was he surprised? Was he expecting me to get a warm welcome?
Lord Ferdinand, I am keenly aware that my plans are usually naive and overly optimistic, but I would have never expected that from you.
I pointed towards the center of the mansion.
This is the family that got their heads so big that they started a feud with arch nobles because they thought they are suddenly too good. And you give someone like that a commoner to adopt? What exactly did you expect?
Like, I had mentally prepared for a much worse outcome. This was actually still better than the dungeon I had expected. But Ferdinand shook his head.
We notified them that the future adopted daughter of the Archduke wants to bring her acquaintance into nobility because of their friendly relationship.
Well, phrase like that, it didn't sound like a bad deal.
They themselves were agreeable to such a notion when Corset informed them about it. Such a relationship could bring them a connection to the Archducal family which all nobles seek.
Ferdinand looked up towards the ceiling.
That they would treat you this way seems utterly idiotic. There is no logic in adopting you to exploit your friendly relationship with Rosamine only to treat you poorly.
Yes, he was looking at this rationally, and because of that, it didn't make sense to him. But come on! Why could I see it from miles away that their ego would be to the detriment, and not you? Their demise was like the one thing I described pretty clearly when I was offering my knowledge during our information sharing. Ferdinand sighed and shook his head repeatedly.
Come with me to the waiting room.
He immediately produced... Oh, sorry.
Yes, wait, but I was supposed to take care of this floor.
He immediately produced such a glare that I made a small step back. Then he whipped out his staff and cast a spell. Within seconds, the rest of the corridor was done.
He
ordered afterwards. When we moved to the room, he gave me a sound blocking tool.
Can I ask how Rosamine is doing?
Ferdinand probably gave me the tool for some other purpose, but I used the occasion.
She is fine.
He said.
What's with the look?
He added after. My disbelief was showing more than I wanted.
Well, she wasn't really fine in the book, and I don't think anything changed about that.
She was separated from her family. Nothing I did changed that, and nothing I did made that better.
So I have this idea.
He almost rolled his eyes when I said that. Or maybe I just imagined that. It was hard to tell with him. I tried to defend myself.
This isn't some random thought I just came up with on the spot during a stressful meeting. It's actually something I thought about even before I even came to this world.
Well, let's hear it then.
There still wasn't too much enthusiasm in his voice.
In that book, you used teleportation circle to bring necessary tools for potion making into your hidden room to Rosamine's. Couldn't the same be used for secret meetings? She could enter her hidden room alone, and if someone else invited an unrelated family for some random excuse, like decorating some other hidden room...
She needs to grow up to get used to functioning without them, otherwise it will be even harder for her later.
He was about to end this topic, but I tried once more.
I understand that. I'm not saying that she needs a crutch like that. But even in my world, when a family spreads in different directions and people live in faraway regions, there are still occasional meetings during celebrations, like, let's say, during a New Year celebration, when people travel back to meet, like one day a year when people can reconnect. It's something that people look forward to.
To me, it sounded much more palatable when someone could look forward to the whole year to one particular day than thinking about it as never again. And in both scenarios, 419 days every year would be identical without them meeting, so not much difference to their plans.
Why do you care?
I mean, it literally costs me nothing to suggest it. And as far as I can think, there are no visible negative consequences out of that.
Ferdinand looked around the empty room.
I previously relied on your knowledge and it almost ended in disaster.
Eh? When? Was that why you'd been so adamant to not know the future? Because Sylvester looked much more interested during our information sharing.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to cause anything bad. Did I endanger someone?
Yourself.
Me?
That came out of nowhere for me.
I was so impressed with your retelling of the Tramba incident that I believed that you did know the future. And since you were aware of the danger in the south that I was already covering, I mistakenly believed that you could see all the future danger.
I should have been more precise back then. When he heard me talk about prophetic dreams and not being aware of threats, he must have got the wrong idea that I knew about all of the threats, not just some specific ones.
Shortly after Bindevold's attack, I managed to talk to the Grey Shrine Maiden that escorted you during your spring prayer. You scared her to death.
Was this about the robbery attempt during our travel? Maybe when I pretended to be a noble and scared all those robbers away?
But I told her that I just bluffed. All my talk about how I burned down the nearby town, it was just a bluff. You know I don't have such power.
Sure, she might not be used to violence, but I just made the threats. But Ferdinand shook his head.
Okay?
I'm not talking about that. She saw you put a knife against yourself when you were surrounded.
Oh, that? That was actually a really horrible thing to do to her. We were surrounded by a horde of attackers. She, a Grey Road, had probably never seen violence in her life. She must have been more scared than anyone. And then she saw me try to peace out. Yeah, goodbye, now it's your problem. I hadn't actually done that. If I had actually done that and left her completely alone, that image was uncomfortable. The guilt stung inside me. I was a blue robe out there, and I was basically your supervisor responsible for her. Heck, mentally I was much older than her, and I was gonna abandon her. Thankfully, I was too afraid to do it.
I'm sorry. When I get in contact with her, I will apologize to her as well.
Every time there was a danger, I always focused on just myself.
I too want to apologize. If I had put a single night with you, it could have been avoided.
It made me feel much better when he actually considered that option.
You know, a night wouldn't be necessary if I had a high beast. I can just avoid any dangerous roads.
Ferdinand, or I said jokingly, Ferdinand looked at me with suspicion,
This feels like a plan on your part.
but I just smiled.
If I had the mental capacity to plan this with my knowledge, I would be Zent by now and not mopping floors. This is just good old opportunism.
I whined my smile a little bit more.
And wouldn't it help with the logistics of next year's spring prayer?
I added to make a sales pitch, but he didn't seem too that enthusiastic about it.
In your knowledge, do you also possess estimates of how much magic tools cost?
He asked derisively.
No, I have no idea. I know that low quality magic tools that suck mana out of lay noble children are around 5 small golds, which is currently way over my means, so pretty much anything related to magic I ask for will be audacious on my part.
Yeah, basically, I was asking a rich friend to buy me a car. It was shameless, but it was worth a try. The worst he could do was say no. Oh, Mila.
You will be provided that by your family when you enter the Royal Academy.
Yes, hopefully, if they will agree.
I tried one last guilt trip.
I'll think about it.
He took his sound blocking tool back. The activity around the room was slowly diminishing. By the sound of it, everything was almost finished.
Still, now all of this work feels like a waste. Everyone in this house is working hard to polish everything before your arrival, yet you are already here.
I noted. I knew he was busy with preparation for the other, much more important baptism. But it didn't sound like him to announce his arrival a day before then show up so soon.
Oh, these preparations are not for me. They are for Karstad, who will come later in the afternoon. That he will also attend your baptism was announced yesterday.
So that was why there was such short notice. They knew the time of the ceremony in advance. Now it made more sense. Or not. Did they want to look good in front of Ferdinand? Since his arrival for the baptism had been announced way ahead of time, it meant they didn't plan anything for him. It changed only when they heard Karstedt presence beside him.
I would have thought they would try to accommodate the high priest in the first place.
Why?
I mean, the high bishop is gone. Aren't you currently the highest authority in the temple?
I asked, but Ferdinand just scoffed.
You really overestimate the attractiveness of connections to the temple. Not to mention, they probably don't know yet about the former High Bishop's demise.
My view of people's status was skewed. It was almost impossible to think about people without their possible future. I regarded other blue priests as not a big deal, because in my eyes they were all small fry once Rosamund became the High Bishop. Similarly, I saw Ferdinand as someone with much higher status than he currently had, though he should at least be halfway there now with Veronica was deposed.
With all those knights during the incident, I would have thought it would have already spread everywhere, like news of the healing ritual after the trumpet mission.
The Archduke was involved in the second event, so I thought people would talk even more.
That trauma mission was a summon of all available knights at the time, so the news spread further. The incident in the temple was covered by just the knights stationed in the Ehrenfest.
So it was spreading mostly just in the nobles' quarters. Although, with all those ordinances nobles had, they could share any news within a day with the whole duchy. Were they all holding it just so they had something to talk about during winter socializing?
But you are still the brother of the Archduke, and they are Medno. Isn't that still too over the line to act this way?
The former High Bishop wasn't even a noble, and the others had to at least show some respect, since his family was running the duchy. Ferdinand looked at me as if he was agreeing.
Do you think so? To me, it is on par with some daughter of a noble asking the brother of the Archduke to give her a high beast.
Yes, that would be rude from her, right?
I smiled brightly. Ferdinand smiled right there. I was going to be a HoS VA, so it was only natural I would start making unreasonable demands way over my status. Oh boy, do you make unreasonable demands over your status. A knight entered the room. I knew him. This is the knight who had escorted me to my room after Bindewald's attack. Well, Ferdinand had exactly one knight, so it wasn't hard to guess it was Eckhard.
Anything?
Ferdinand asked. Eckhart shook his head. Judging by that interaction, he had some other task. Thinking about it, Ferdinand as the priest didn't need a knight, and having one here would be highly suspicious. That was probably why Karstedt was coming this way. I had been wondering why he would come. He had no relation to me, and it wasn't like we were in the nobles' corners, where everybody could just stop by to join the celebration. Even by High Priest, we were all a bit far away for a courtesy visit. And even though HoS VA didn't expect him to come along, judging by how all the preparations were getting together at the last possible moment. But if they framed it as Karstedt being the one who recommended me to them, he could claim that he was just interested enough to attend. And why not bring some family along, right? Like, for example, his son. They were family, nothing weird about that. And that son happened to be Ferdinand's knights. What a coincidence. And I was just the one who told them about HoS VA's involvement in a future kidnapping attempt. So it wasn't hard to figure out what they were actually looking for. Eckhart was probably just scouting around while everyone was overwhelmed with preparations.
Alright, yeah. I'm now officially skipping my linear algebra class to be here. Whatever, I don't learn anything there anyways.
Based?
Alright,
I should
Wait,
encourage
what?
you.
No. The class sucks. I learn more when I just read the textbook. I'll spend the time waiting for you to get back to the campus, just reading whatever we were learning in class. Anyways, so we need Anlia. Out of our 10 what can't choose means name before, we need a pancake and we need a Meredith.
I'll be doing Alia.
Alright.
Can I be Pancake?
Were you gonna be there?
Pancake?
They definitely share scenes. Alright.
Can I be narrator? Because I see that it
Yeah,
went
sure.
back to my first
Yeah, you can be narrator. Hey, hear me. Are you gonna join us?
Wait, what?
Jeremy, do you want to voice act?
I am in the
I
middle
will
of
be.
cooking. Sorry.
Oh, I got it. So, hey, Wheels, not to typecast you or anything, but do you want to be Meredith?
Sure.
So attendant 1, attendant 2 can be the same ones that we already cast last chapter.
All right.
Okay.
Who's Pancake?
Cindy.
No, Cindy's a dais. Like, they don't share any lines in this chapter, but they're definitely going to share scenes later.
And Pancake's someone that hangs around, not just like random attendant or cook helper.
Yeah. Faye? I don't think Pancake ever meets Ferdinand.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think Cindy's here for a bit. Finally, the guest of honor arrived. The commander of the Knight's Order was greeted outside by the Ghee.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, you're
Never
next.
mind.
Sorry, Risa.
No, you continue if you
No.
wish to. You can
No, you go.
continue if you wish to narrate.
I just forgot that you were gonna do this part.
Getting around the baptism. Finally, the guest of honor arrived. The commander of the Knight's Order was greeted outside by the Gib and then escorted to the waiting room where the rest of us were. The moment he entered, a clear surprise showed on his face.
You with Joyce on talk. Why is she in that commoner uniform?
The Jeep obviously didn't know what to say. He probably only thought about his meeting with Karsted, and only now did he come to a realization that I was kind of a necessary part of his baptism and adoption, since it was my baptism and adoption. Time to score some good points.
My apologies. I wanted to help with preparation before my ascent to nobility. I sneaked out in this attire. Forgive my rudeness. I'm sure the attendants with my dress must be getting restless.
Ferdinand already knew the circumstances, and that meant that Karsted would learn them as well. There was no point to reveal the truth. Even if he complained to the Jeep to treat me better, such a thing would only last until he left. And then I would be really screwed. And that was one of my better versions. Just simple abuse out of spite. The much more terrifying option was them treating me better on the outside and hate me because of his complaints. They could just get rid of me by poisoning or some other means. As I was finishing my apology, my eyes moved a little to meet the Jeep's. I nodded a bit and he immediately understood. Forgive her rudeness. There is much more she needs to be educated about. Alia, bring her to her room so she can get dressed. A young woman with purple hair and startled eyes immediately left the gibbous escort. He then turned to Karsted. Young girls always need time to prepare. We can have a relaxing tea in the lounge room,
Lead the way.
Karsted said. Meanwhile, I was rushed out of the room. The young woman who was bringing me outside was smiling politely like any regular attendant, but her dark blue eyes were clearly in panic. There was obviously no dress. They expected Ferdinand to come, do the ritual, and then get kicked out before everything would get back to normal. I could see here how her mind was moving full speed. We arrived in a room full of female attendants. She shortly described the situation, and then they quickly divided up the area of search. They couldn't produce a new dress on the spot, so the only solution was to find something that would fit me for the occasion, which meant that they had to search the wardrobes of noble women.
Can you just stay here? We'll be right back.
Alia said with a tinge of frustration.
Certainly.
Her face got a little less tense as she didn't have to supervise me, and then they all swiftly moved out of the room. A few minutes later, they began to return and put various dresses all around me. Most of them were too small, so I was putting those away as new ones arrived. Those few bigger ones could have to do the job. In the end, none fit properly. I really had to go with those bigger ones. There was one dress I actually liked, but it wasn't a good pick since changes would be more visible on it. They put me in one with a lot more frills and started to readjust it with pins. Then they put ribbons on top to hide those. The pins were scratching me a little, but I tried to ignore that. I didn't want to add to their panic. They all still looked so composed, but I could clearly feel the rush. The dress was readjusted, but none of them looked satisfied.
It is too obvious, even with the servants.
One of the attendants said. I couldn't exactly look. This wasn't a changing room. There was no mirror. They were discussing possible situations, but they weren't seamstress. It wasn't like they had a bunch of spare clothes and decorations to do this. So I asked while looking at the other dresses around me.
Are we allowed to damage these dresses?
They all glanced at me and then immediately down at the other dresses.
It's Lieutenant 1. We use the same rules we cast last chapter. Who was Lieutenant 1? I don't remember.
I thought I had the grey one.
Yeah, well, the numbers are maybe different. No, yeah. So if you're, we just need anyone, one more random person to be.
Ichi.
I can do it.
Oh,
Certainly.
Yes, this one looks cheap.
One of them said. Obviously, they took the one I liked and ripped decorations from it, then they adorned my dress with them to hide the changes.
This might too.
Alia nodded to herself. Then she rushed me back to our guests.
Curse again.
Bien.
He's on mute.
1 second.
Alright, got it.
I'm trying to get back to where we were.
Splendid dress.
Splendid dress.
Karstead remarked, though he didn't look like he cared. I thanked him for his praise while forcing my smile. The pins were as uncomfortable as ever.
Now we can move to the main event.
He concluded. Indeed, the hall is already prepared. The jeep said and led us the way for everyone. I was put in the room nearby and told to wait there. When I was called into the hall, I could see around 3,000 nobles in attendance. It was manageable, still enough people to cause me unease as if I had to give a report in front of the class, but far away from the dreadful image of 800 nobles during the winter debut. The fear of that event made it actually more palatable now, and I didn't have to do anything complex like playing music. All I had to do was touch a stick, bless Ferdinand, and look for my colors. Not necessarily in that order. I was actually interested in my affinities. Would I get some exotic combination? I picked. Okay, water, earth, fire, wind. Well, I can be the master of the library shoemills, but I can still be the avatar. Hehehe.
And here it is,
Well, yeah.
the line that started it all. So much
Though,
for one
The
joke.
whispering community will never be the same again.
Yeah.
though air and wind weren't completely the same thing, so there went my potential side gig. Ferdinand eyed me with a tinge of suspicion, but I just continued with the whole process and finished without a hiccup. It helped that I had read about this ritual so many times that it wasn't anything new to me. Then it was time for introductions. I was introduced to my new adoptive mother. She had red eyes and brown hair similar to her son. Her smile was calm and there was no visible adversity. But among nobles, that didn't have to mean anything. And there was also the Jibbe's younger sister, Melusine. She had bright yellow hair and dark blue eyes. And I managed to remember her name because she was like the only one who genuinely looked glad to meet me instead of just regular politeness. And then went everyone else. I obviously didn't remember a single name in such rapid succession. And rather than trying to do that, I was just focusing on the faces. A majority seemed neutral, coming with just a polite greeting with nothing of substance. There were a few surprised ones, mostly those that interacted with me as a servant, especially the attendant that gave me permission to use magic tools. A few that clearly saw me in an unfriendly fashion. At least there weren't too many of them. There was still the frightening possibility that the rest could just mask it better, which was scary as hell. But if not, then I could just avoid those who looked reserved towards me. Especially this one. He clearly looks hostile towards me. I put him into my avoid list.
My name is.
My name is
Oh, aren't I Pancreas?
Pancreas.
Who?
Yes, it's pancake.
Yeah. I think we're gonna do Faye's pancake because Cindy, you're a deus and they share scenes.
Alright, fair enough. My fault.
My name is Pancratius. I am the head attendant of Gabe Joyzentag.
Damn it! It looked like he was someone more important than a random attendant that could be shooed away. After introductions came the feast. The Gibby was trying to entertain his visitors while I was sitting near my new mother. She was smiling in a polite manner, so I just copied her and used the smile which I trained from Rosina.
That dress looks lovely. Have you brought it here from Ehrenfest?
Where would I get the money for such a dress? They were probably told that I was a blue Shireen maiden, so there had to be some money behind me to support that. I wished there was some money behind me.
It was afforded to me by a generous noblewoman from here. I only hope they will regard it as such when they find out.
Mother used her polite smile to gloss over it and continued to ask me about myself and the temple. It was almost like an interrogation, but I didn't feel any malicious intent behind it. While her speech was simple at the beginning, she added more and more noble euphemisms in her questions as we were progressing. I kept up thanks to what I learned from Jenny and Rosina and my reading of the Bible, but soon we came to questions I had no idea what they meant. Once she saw that, she glossed over it again and simplified her sentences. So she was basically trying to figure out how much I can keep conversation as a commoner.
Did you have a tutor in the temple?
No, but my attendant used to serve a shrine maiden that was educated by her noble family before being brought back to nobility. I learned from her.
Jenny was capable, if only.
Interesting. Quite a few shrine maidens are reclaiming their noble origin lately.
That was a question for me between the lines. Was she asking me whether I had a noble origin just like Rosamund and Christina?
Yes, it seems so. I am glad that they were able to reconnect with their roots. I cannot even imagine how hard such separation must have been for them.
Well, that should signal pretty clearly I don't to her. The feast was shorter than usual since our guests were leaving the same day, and once they left, the number of people in the hall quickly diminished as everyone went their way. At the end, there were only my new parents, the Gibbs head attendant, and me. This was my last chance to use the celebratory mood and try to uphold my adoption.
Father?
I started with caution. You will call me Jebbe Josentak, he retorted. Well, it was worth a try. I looked around. Pancratius was smiling with satisfaction. Mother had a neutral smile on her face, but it was almost as if there was some kind of anticipation in her. What was she expecting? What will I even do with you? The Gibbe said under his breath. He looked unsure. That meant he was malleable. I could still forge something out of this.
My apologies for not understanding how I should act in a new social situation.
I used my innocent voice and pretended to be clueless.
You should know your place. Is that not simple enough?
Pancratius said bluntly. He was miffed, and I just continued with my clueless act.
I once again apologize for my lack of knowledge. My only interaction with true nobility was with the Knight Commander's daughter, who treated me in a cordial fashion.
First, get the hint. You brought me here because of this connection. Karstedt, her father, literally showed up here today for me. Although it was probably a guy so they could bring Eckhart to scout, but these people didn't know that, so I might as well use it for my own benefit.
And now you expect the same treatment just because you were pampered?
Well,
The head attendant sounded offended. I was technically talking with him, but my full focus was on the Gibe.
true, it is my mistake to be so naive. I must admit that now I feel fearful for her own treatment when she enters the archducal family.
I put my bait there with fake worry in my voice. Lord Karstedt has the blood of an archduke candidate from a generation before. Her position is nothing like yours. This time it was Jebbe Josentak who replied.
That is a relief.
I smiled. Then I put back my clueless face.
But now I'm even more lost. How should I interact properly, being uplifted in status, if you or your family member were brought into the family of an archnoble? What treatment would be proper, so I would know how to act properly?
You should. The Jibbe lost his words. Pancratius wanted to interject on his behalf, but my new mother was faster.
You can call me Mother.
Both men turned to her with surprise, and she smiled at her husband.
I determined that she is not an uncouth child, as you said after your first meeting. We can let her serve Aranet.
Yes, she can still serve, the Gibb sighed. It was as he just realized some great option in front of him. Then he added with a more quiet voice. Lord Corstead shouldn't have any problem with her supporting her new sister.
Um,
Mother kept smiling at him.
And while she'll be interacting with her siblings, she should use the same language as them to not confuse them.
The Gib nodded to that. He was already sold. All right, I'm allowing you to call me father in private situations. Not publicly. Come on, I'm already struggling with Elven names and titles. Don't give me more conditions to remember. Did he mean public as outside of this house or here when other nobles are around? Were we currently in public when his head attendant was standing nearby?
I am grateful for your consideration, Father, Mother.
I said that with as much courtesy as I was physically able. Neither of my parents objected to my wording, though the head attendant wasn't pleased at all.
Alright.
Should I be the narrator?
Sure. If you want to.
Where is there a link for this?
Oh yeah, in general, there's a thread for Herald of Spring highlighted.
Ah, I check it out.
Where
Yeah,
almost
Huey has
on
been
to
doing
the
it.
area
Oh yeah,
notes.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for the highlights, Jeremy. By the way.
Yeah, these are like very useful.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. They are perfect.
Mhm,
They are
No
yeah.
problem. I'm
lifesavers.
glad to get using it.
Yeah, it's typically the little headers of each chapter of who's in who, who's in which part.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I heard you guys were doing it without it highlights, I was like, how are they doing it? Because even I confuse sometimes who is talking.
With
Yeah,
very
yeah.
little duct tape and dreams is how we did it.
Alright.
Makes sense.
It was terrible.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Font when a character that we weren't expecting came up.
Who's reading again? Next?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Barry got it, sure.
New attendant.
You can leave now. I need to discuss certain arrangements with your mother.
Father must have wanted to discuss me without me being present.
Certainly. Where should I go?
I replied obediently. He probably wanted to say, to your room, but obviously there was no room. Just like there was no dress, no arrangements, and pretty much nothing, since I only got at least this shaky father-daughter relationship.
Pancratius, assign Ali as her attendant. She already arranged for her dress. She can help her move to her room.
Could you just do that? Even a lay noble attendant was still, in the end, a noble. Shouldn't she agree to such a thing first? I was certainly no expert, but it fell off.
As you wish.
Pancratius said and began to move. I followed him to the upper floor, and soon we would meet Leah.
The Gib wishes for you to become the new attendant of this web.
The despair on her face was quite visibly despite her smile. Okay, there were obviously some complications with my background, but that reaction was as if her life was ending. And the way Pancratius phrased it was also quite rude. I didn't want to start a quarrel with anyone, but he already had a problem with me. I would not destroy that much if I tried to uphold my status.
Please excuse this unintentional mistake from my father's head attendant. He is probably still adjusting to this recent change in status and will no doubt follow the proper etiquette next time.
After that speech, I smiled brightly towards Leah.
I am looking forward to your service.
I added with friendly fashion. In response, she knelt. Lady Mila. Oh, someone actually called me a lady. It sounded weird, and not just because I was missing at least one syllable in my name for it to sound noble-like. Pancrasius left us without a word. I wondered how much damage I had inflicted on myself with that mark. But still, I had to keep up with my status. It was better to annoy one person than him diminishing me in front of other nobles. When an angry noble, I could avoid that. But if all of the staff here started to treat me with disregard, it could hamper my life for quite a bit. I was already holding by a shaky thread, supported by only one, by the Gibbs wife, and even that was caused by the mismatch between her husband and what her husband had told her about me at our first meeting. Me not just acting as a complete embarrassment must have exceeded her expectations, and it subsequently made a good impression. And I needed to keep that impression for as long as possible, which meant acting my status. Though what exactly that meant was quite murky to me. Well, I could at least think about it later.
Anlia, could you show me the way to my new room?
Certainly. Hey, she didn't even ask what room, which was a good sign. She served her, so she probably already knew what was available and proper for me to occupy. Was this yet another competent attendant serving me while being completely miserable because of serving me?
Also, could you notify me whether to arrange compensation for the noblewoman who donated these dresses? One can probably be returned properly, but the other one was destroyed.
I will speak to her attendants. Would it be too daring to also ask for a new one? Well, I couldn't exactly act noble-like in my servant clothes. Ferdinand had made that clear, so I risked it.
And could you also ask her for a proper dress as a replacement? Speed is vital in this case.
I understand, she replied knowingly. No, seriously, it was vital. Those pins were scratching me this whole time. There were no dots and mark all over my body by now. It was a pain just to move.
Hi, Mila.
I was greeted by a dais in a corridor that led to my room. He was once again in a cheerful mood. If everyone here acted like him, this household would actually be a nice place to be. Although now I was wondering who raised him. He certainly didn't act like his father, and while his mother was much better, she too ignored her adopted child until her baptism. My new brother was the only one who approached me on his own, even as I was put outside.
How was your big day?
He asked me with anticipation.
It was eventful.
I gave a non-answer, but Adeas didn't mind.
I remember my first baptism. I was completely scared of giving the blessing, but you seem fine.
Yeah, I had experience from the temple.
The actual truth was that they now owned a carriage with a rather blessed interior.
Really? The way Father talked about the temple this whole month, he made it sound as everyone educated there would struggle. But I guess he must have exaggerated. I mean, even that priest that came here to do your baptism came on a high beast. It looked really cool.
His eyes were full of awe towards Ferdinand's winged lion.
When I attend the academy, I will make mine in that shape.
Well, time to crush some child's dreams.
Sadly, only the archducal family can use a lion for their high beast. Although Lord Ferdinand is currently a priest, he is also the archduke's brother.
Adea slumped his shoulders.
I guess I'll think about something else. What about you? Do you have something in mind?
I didn't really think about the animal. I knew that I wanted to be able to copy it being a gerbil from Rosemine, but that was about it.
Me? Probably a shumo.
I had a pretty good mental image of them, and driving one would certainly be more fun than slapping one.
You like them too? Aaronit loves shoe mills.
Adea said in an excited voice. We began to talk about his little sister. Well, technically, our little sister.
I'm glad you came here.
His words brought me warmth inside. Not many people had such an attitude towards me.
I was thinking, this year, I'll show you how it goes in the winter playgroup, and the next year, you can be there for Aaronit after her baptism. The first year is always scary with all those new faces.
Next year? Those words rang in my head. Tears formed in my eyes. I tried to hold them, but it was no use. They started to pour down my cheeks, and my vision got blurry. The pressure on my face was so strong that even my nose got runny.
Are you alright?
My brother got confused. I turned my head away.
Yes, and I would very much like that. Now, please excuse me. I need to get to my room. Analia?
My voice cracked. My tenant swiftly moved to the right door, and I disappeared inside. Just in time, my nose started leaking as well. I asked for her handkerchief while still looking away. My proper act didn't last for even 5 minutes.
Analia, could you please make the arrangements we discussed? Then we can deal with this.
I wanted to appear in full control, but I sounded tearful instead. As you wish, she replied and left the room. I was finally alone, so I could sob freely. The moment he mentioned the next year, my mind instinctively tried to look into my story for knowledge. And there was a solid second when I was confused why I don't know anything about him or sister. And then my memory caught up with me. It was an awful hit. They were all purged, of course. There was no one to be remembered.
This is the worst.
I complained to myself. I should have stayed in the temple. I would have never known his face when he was so proudly smiling about his plan to have both of his sisters with their first year in the society. But I changed things, didn't I? I warned them about the letter and Jardine and everything. They were certainly looking into the Röstervang soldiers, and they would just they could just avoid avoid a whole disaster. Though, if I looked at it as a noble, why avoid it when you could create a trap instead? Wouldn't it be better to just let it flow, or even to push it somehow in a desirable direction to take care of potential trouble? With all the evidence served on a platter? Guy Bjosentak thought about the consequences of his actions so much and so thoroughly that he would have been an ideal Manda's pawn regardless of who used him. Whether Georgian's factions to make a strike against the Archducal family, or the Archducal family to goad them into a trap now that they knew the rough outline of a possible plan. All in all, it might as well be me. I should at least assure that he wouldn't get his whole household purged. Wouldn't that Daester succeed him? Nope, he's like me. No, he's like 9. That would be silly. I should do some information gathering before I can start planning anything. By the time Leah returned, I had put myself together. Lady Mila, may I ask what disturbed you so much that you needed May I ask what disturbed you so much when you talked to your brother? Me being afraid that everyone here would be killed by the keep's foolishness probably wasn't the best answer to that question. So there was me lying again.
Because of the nature of my adoption, I was taken by surprise that someone showed me that kind of familial affection. You do not have to worry. I have regained my composure, and it won't happen again.
My face probably wasn't in a presentable state, but who cared? It was almost time to go to sleep, so that would solve itself. I just held my expression with a neutral smile to show that I could control myself. Let's get you out of that dress, and I will prepare a bath for you. And Leah didn't pry further. She got behind me and began undoing my dress. It was so meticulous work, since she had to take all the pins, take out all the pins first. Finally, the scratching was all over. It was over. When the last pin was out, relief washed over me. Oh, I heard behind me as the dress went down. I apologize. We were in such a hurry and prioritized the pins to be hidden that we completely missed the potential harm to you. Yeah, I had scratch marks everywhere. The dress was adjusted. On the bright side, it was all in places that could be hidden under any other dress.
Given the constraints, I understand.
She was regretful about it. That was enough for me. I moved to my bath. It was anything but relaxing, but the scratches stung in the hot water. But after that, I could finally go to bed. Will you need anything before sleep? And Leah asked while looking over me.
I would like to ask you a question. If it's considered impolite or you do not want to answer, you have my permission to just ignore it, as if I never asked.
She nodded in understanding, so I asked.
I didn't want to mention it at the time when the head attendant was here, but it seemed like your assignment to me caused you a great deal of discomfort. I understand that they didn't consult you on this. Do you want me to ask for a different attendant? There still might be time. Things haven't yet settled properly.
Her face got a little embarrassed when she heard me. There's no need. I didn't have any trouble with you. It was just... She looked away. I didn't think it was proper to bring up personal problems to one's master.
You are aware of my background before adoption, right? Well, I must maintain decorum in the public to not be looked down upon. I don't really mind in general. Of course, if it's something you don't want to talk about, I will respect that and won't push.
My reassurance actually brought some comfort to her. My family used to serve in Elginor. It's a province in the south. Because of certain circumstances, most noble families left in the province, and my family were among them. Thankfully, Cape Rosenthal was hiring at the same time. It's just... She looked embarrassed as her words trailed away. Then she started anew. The province of Elginor has a culture that is a little bit different. And I was employed here. I acted towards commoners in a way that brought ridicule from some of the other nobles here, especially from the head attendant. That was great. Not the fact that she was ridiculed, obviously, but that I actually had an attendant that didn't have a problem interacting with commoners. And Leah looked directly at me. The way he presented you, I thought he was just harassing me. But the moment you put him in his place, I understand that this was a real assignment. Now I understood as well. She thought at the time that the whole baptism was just a show for our important guest, and I would be returning back to my position of a commoner servant. To be honest, she wasn't too far off. They had actually planned something exactly like that. If that happened, and I returned back to my room in the building that housed common servants, her being my attendant would be a complete mockery to her. Everyone would be laughing behind her back. But the moment I held my own against the noble, she understood that that wasn't the case. I signed a contract. I signed a contract to serve the Gibbs family, not just an individual, as it is usual. A lot of new servants did, so he actually doesn't have to consult me about whom from his family I should serve, and I do not mind serving you.
I'm glad. Thank you for telling me.
It filled me with joy. My father probably didn't even think about it when he sent her specifically to find me for address, find me a dress. It might have been subconscious. He just sent an attendant with a sin on her reputation, but he did a great service to me by that.
Oh, I would like to talk to Lem, head of the commoner servants.
I said enthusiastically.
After we settle my dress issue.
I added in a lower voice. I understand. Sleep well. With that, she left my room. I was beginning to drift into my dreams. It was it was a really an eventful day. My new family actually recognized me, which was a step up. But they might all get purged as a result of that investigation I put into motion. And I did climb into nobility after all. In the end, I dreamed about jumels. They were just hopping around me the whole night until a truck showed up and started honking. That's when I looked up towards the driver. There was Samuel with yet another jumel beside him, and that was when I woke up.
All right. Should we continue onwards, or should we stop here now? How much longer should we go?
It would be better to stop here. My opinion.
Yeah. Alright. Okay, well, it's nice. Do we need to? Are we gonna go on Friday again, or because it's reading week next week? So I'm off school. Cynthia, I think. Well, Cynthia still has work, but yeah. Or is there a better time than Friday?
I will announce from now because that I won't be attending next week.
Yeah. Okay, I also need I know I will be busy one day, but I'm not sure exactly when. Well, I guess I'll see you guys later.
Yeah.
Cindy, if you're gonna come, don't forget to bring a mug.
Yeah. Should I bring milk?
If you want to.
What tea are you taking?
Oh, so yeah, I have
Could you stop the recording?
black tea, English breakfast, and chai black tea.
They're both great with milk. I love them.
Okay, sure. Then Cindy can bring some milk.
I'll there's a convenience store right at the bus stop. Oh shit!
Yeah.
Right, I'll do that.